Hello, everyone, and thank you. YouTube, you feeling okay? Okay, YouTube is now apparently feeling okay. Right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Fleet's Random Ramblings on Monday, the 24th of February. Yes, the last ramblings of February. I know it's amazing what can happen when you keep going forwards, isn't it? Funny that YouTube, you. Oh, hang on, that was me. That was me from the past, like 10 seconds ago. I know, what a shocking revelation. Good times. So, unless I am very much mistaken, I should have two questions each from the two Patreons who actually use their privileges as fantastic funders. Not everybody does, but if two people want to use it out of the three that give it, honestly, that's fine. We don't mind. We don't mind here. Okay, so let's have a look. All right. Okay. So, alrighty then, folks. Let me just bring in the chaps from the old Discord server. And of course, let the people on my Discord know that I'm going live. The problem with flicking backward and forward between Twitch is that scheduling things is a bitch, politely, if you must know. But we're live now. Right, so, without further ado... let's see. Oh, I forgot the ping, didn't I? Whoops. Never mind. It's fine. It's fine. Fleet's fine. Honestly, it's fine. It's fine. Hello, Timu. Hello, Stephen. Right, so... I've been so busy over the last week. Right, since... so Timu Locker on Patreon asks, since Dr. Alex likes to have some Battle of Trafalgar questions, here's one.
Hello.
Can you name the youngest and oldest ships from both fleets? Off the top of my head, no. I actually can't. I'd have to go away and look. I'm gonna be completely honest with people. Like, I get these Trafalgar questions, but the battle just doesn't interest me. It's an important.
Well,
it's
that's
an
an opinion.
it's an important piece of historical record, but it's just not the period of naval history that interests me. My interest basically starts after the Classic Age of Sail ends and the steam engine enters naval history. It's just who I am. I just don't read into Trafalgar that. And honestly, to be fair, Timu, I did actually go away and try and find information online about what the oldest ships about the oldest and newest ships on both sides. And I'm looking again, but my search was pretty much fruitless last time. Like, I dug deep. I went like 10 pages deep on Google. Like, I dug. I really, really dug. Like, I dug. But...
Honestly, I think that's where you have to start putting together the spreadsheet.
And
keeping track of it yourself.
And at that point, I'm like, that's reaching a level of work that I'm going... I don't have the interest or the drive to do it. I don't mind answering questions about Trafalgar, but it is work for me to go and look for this stuff. I don't get any enjoyment out of it, if you want the honest answer. It just doesn't interest me. I did the wrong ping again, didn't I? Every single time. I'm going to request that bloody roll be removed at the rate we're going.
Which?
Fleet seal of approval. It doesn't have any bloody roll anymore, and it's confusing people. It's confusing me. Never mind anybody else.
I think I still have that one.
Hey. But, like I say, Timu, I looked. I did look. But I just couldn't find it. But for your next question, what is Fleet's favourite pre-nationalisation locomotive that was widely used in the UK? Oh, that's really, really easy. I have a real, and I mean a real soft spot for and this goes across the board, for the various, not just pre-nationalisation, but the various pre-grouping 460s that you saw across the various pre-1921 railway companies. And the reason I say them as a whole is because there were so many different companies that were moving in similar directions, but in a different way. The British passenger 460 doesn't really... It sort of is jumped straight to the Pacific by the needs of the big four companies. So you don't really see the passenger 460 really...
That's on the Great Western.
Yeah, but even then, the Great Western 460s are basically Pacifics without trailing wheels, if we're going to be completely blunt.
Yeah. I mean, the Firebox isn't that much smaller.
Yeah, this is the thing. Like on the Great Western, they're four-cylinder 460s. I'm more talking about the more traditional 460s for express work you see built by the London North Western Railway, Great Central Railway, the Northeastern's brief flirtations with the 460, the Great Northern's brief flirtations with 460s, Caledonian 460s.
I'm gonna have to say the J50.
But I don't want to single out any single one, because I honestly have a soft spot for them all. And if I'm going to include one, I basically have to include all, so that's exactly what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
Brandon
me,
Larson,
you didn't actually
you didn't put in your two questions this week, as was your right, because to make up for last week, you didn't put in your two questions.
I'm gonna have to say, for me, on what my favorite one is,
did you
forget? Up between the Ginty and the J50.
Did you
one of the
he forgot? He forgot. Brandon Larson forgot. Go on, get him in. Go on, get him in. Go on, use the Patreon chat. Go on, get him in. I'll give you 10 minutes. You've got two questions. Go on, get him in.
I'm actually going to be right back because I just pulled into the Donner Pass rest area.
Get him in, Brandon. Go on, use the Fantastic Funders question zone on Patreon. Go on, get your questions in. I'll wait. It's fine. Go on. I don't want you to miss the 2-question bonus round we've got this week. Go on, get him in. Hey. Let me just check. I will just check if the bot is... The stream bot should be running. I will just check. Let me just... Apparently StreamerBot is running. Let me just check. Let's see if StreamerBot is actually willing to let me know what's going on today. Apparently StreamerBot is already running. Oh, there we go. Yeah, it is running, I would have thought. It's fine. Yeah, seems to be running. It should be. Yep, StreamerBot should be running. I don't know why it's not. But there we go, yeah! StreamerBot's running. I don't know why it's not. That was weird. It was running, but it wasn't transferring questions over. Should be working now. All being well. Hopefully. No, go away. No folders. No. Sorry, having Discord issues. One moment. Thank you. Good. Right. There we go. Now it's doing it. I wonder why it wasn't. Okay. I guess StreamerBot just had a moment. It's fine now, though. Strange. Don't know why it wasn't working there for a second. That's weird. Alright. So. Let me just check if Brandon has done his duty. Not yet. So just waiting for Brandon to put his questions in. So while we are waiting, I have an announcement to make. So, some of you who are very... No, you don't have to post the questions per Patreon. That's not... Only those who are Fleet's Fantastic Funders get the questions answered. Get a question answered early. This week it's 2 questions, because last week we were doing a bit on the Dutch Navy, which was a structured ramblings. So there weren't any questions. Gunnery Officer. I'm just waiting for Brandon Larson to put his 2 in the Fantastic Funders zone in Patreon. So I know which are his 2 questions. Okay, so while we're waiting for that, I do actually have an announcement to make. Those of you who are very long-time Ramblings viewers, and we're talking at least 3+ years back, if not older. When I say the next 3 words, you may actually remember what I'm talking about. Red Fleet Timeline. Those of you who are long-time Ramblings viewers, those 3 words will either get you excited about the possibility of what's going on, or somewhat interested if you don't know what those words mean. The reason I'm saying them is I have an announcement. After about a year and a half of prep, after 2 preparations recorded episodes have been done, by one with Dr. Clark about the reconstruction of Graf Zeppelin, and one with Rex's Hanger on the Soviet aircraft of the timeline.
Which both me and Rex still have nightmares about on both scenarios.
Oh, would you give it a rest? Old man.
Seriously, we do. we keep, commiserating about it.
Dude, I don't believe.
We had to get. We went
I
through
don't
it.
believe that for 1 second.
It was either go through that or listen to you for 2 hours talking about your love of the Hosh.
I don't believe that.
It's a terrible choice to give someone.
If you're going to come up with horror stories about the things I put you through, Dr. Clark, at least make them believable. Anyway, as I was saying,
everyone, nicest way. Torrance will back me up. There is nothing unbelievable about that because it's true. You threaten people with talking about the Hosh on a regular basis.
No, you 2 were both incredibly happy to help me with that, and the video record shows it. So therefore,
but the thing is, you think
no misinformation from you, Dr. Clark.
The rest of us don't.
No misinformation from you, Dr. Clark. Anyway, so very quickly, the announcement is that next week, after a year and a half of prep, after a lot of work by myself, a lot of other people involved in the timeline, and Sea Dodders finally completing pretty much all the last of the ships that we need, including some brand new reworkings and brand new models for certain ships, we are finally ready to bring the definitive version to YouTube. So I am pleased to announce that next week, March the 3rd, Monday, will be, hopefully, the final definitive version of the Red Fleet timeline. So any only questions I will be accepting on Monday the 3rd will be in relation to the Red Fleet timeline under discussion at that point.
But I would ask and I would say to everyone, if the Red Fleet timeline being finished is kind of like me saying I've done my last ever video about Tribal-class destroyers. We all know it's not the case, but Fleet honestly believes it at the time.
Well, no, it is.
We have to get that.
It is. This is it. This is it. We're done. That's it. It's going on the record.
Do you agree with me or Fleet on this one?
We're done. That's it. It's going on the record. There'll be no more. We can talk about it away from the videos, but we're done. There is no more on the record. We're done.
Do you think we'll be talking? Do you think this will be this March the 3rd event will really be the end of the Red Fleet timeline?
I didn't. Don't
Yeah,
don't
what-
insert words
people
into the
agree with-
conversation,
that's why,
Dr. Clark.
Please put everyone in YouTube put in the chat whether you think it would or this next week will be the end of the Red Fleet timeline.
Don't
And
insert.
everybody who's on in the Theatre at Sea chat, please put in the text whether you think it will be the end of the Red Fleet timeline.
Really got...
Let's see what the audience thinks.
You have.
Come on, audience, tell us.
You
Do
have...
we think this is going to be the way it's going to be?
You have really got to stop inserting words where none existed, Dr. Clark. I said it's the final definitive version of the timeline. I didn't say it was the end, nor did I say that it would be the last time we spoke about it.
Then it can't be the final definitive version of the timeline if you're going to keep adding to it, because you're going to keep changing the timeline as you add to it.
Yep.
We can talk about it, we can't add to it after this point. Well, it depends. It depends.
The chat is coming through quite strongly on my side, I think.
Do either of us have the ability to create a poll, Dr. Clark?
No.
Sadly, neither of us have that ability, it seems. We really need Rune on here. It's terrible.
Yeah.
I will field today some generic questions about the Red Fleet timeline if people want to ask them. But try and keep them generic and vague, because I will not. I say again.
Thank you, lazy author Sam. You should be up here with us. We need the extra support to make Fleet understand us.
You cannot
have the definitive version if it is not the end. Thank you, Timu. Thank you, everyone. I need your support.
As I was saying before I was interrupted again. Come on, Dr. Clark. I'm trying to get words in edgeways here. Do you mind? Can I at least finish a sentence before you slap me down? Thank you.
I don't slap you down. I just point out the logical fallacies of what you're saying.
Anyway, as I was saying, so I will be fielding very general and vague questions about the timeline today. However, do not expect spoilers, and if your question will involve spoilers, no, I will let you know that I will not be answering it. Just bear that in mind.
In this increased universe, do the Australians have a large naval aviation service?
The Australian Navy is unchanged from historical.
So whilst everyone else is keeping more carriers and things, the Australians get rid of their carriers.
Yeah, they lean into a combined.
Does that make sense for a nation that's dependent on maritime trade as Australia is?
Yeah, because they
in a world where there's increased carriers.
Yes, because they lean into a joint Commonwealth naval. They lean into a joint Commonwealth fleet plan where there's always a British carrier in Australia working with the Australian Navy. Usually it's the CVA-01 until that is.
Yeah, do we really think the Australians would want their own CVA-01 or something, so they would have their own component burst force?
Yeah,
because that would make far more sense.
It would do, but
so a nice way.
Look,
why would
I have already
stretched.
Because
if everyone else, you've put a scenario where everyone else is funding more. You've got the Japanese having more. You've got the Soviets having more. You've got the Americans having more. You've got all these people having more, and yet you've said the Australians, oh no, they're going to be the one nation which is stupid and not have any more.
Alex, I have literally said numerous times in the group chat that you are a part of, multiple times over the last few months, if anyone sees any holes in the timeline, please speak up. And you have said nothing!
Yeah, but I didn't realise you were building up to a definitive version. I thought you were still organising and adding to it. And, now you're saying it's a definitive version, so I now actually have to point it. I thought
it
to yourself.
It doesn't matter. It's like, why wouldn't you just bring it up anyway?
Coming on again, we haven't, as Donis is pointing out again. The Australians need their forces organised to fit in it. And then what about New Zealand? What about India? What about South Africa?
Well, India.
What about Brazil, Argentina?
We've covered Brazil, Argentina, and Chile. Have you read the timeline at all?
I have. So Brazil, Argentina, and Chile, according to you, have all increased their naval forces, but Australia are quite rich. Population, but maritime dependent in terms of trade for its export of raw materials, has decided they're going to still cut everything.
You chose.
They're not going to fit in with everyone else. They're not going to can maintain their carrier service. They're not going to maintain a carrier arm. They're going to get rid of it when everyone else is increasing their carrier forces. They are going to go it alone. They are going to do what countries often do. They're going to strike out on their own and be an individual nation and not follow the herd.
Do you want to know the honest answer?
Have I tortured you enough yet? Or are you going to be adding in Australia over
Do
this
you want
last
to
week,
know the
frantically?
honest answer?
I didn't be adding in Australia frantically over this week?
I didn't give it much thought, if you want the honest answer.
Yeah.
And also, more to the point, and also,
it can't be the definitive version because you haven't included the Australians then.
You had multiple... Okay, seriously, read the timeline, and if you see any holes...
I've read the timeline.
Well, would you please point out any holes that you see, for God's sake, in text, so I don't have to miss them again? I have given you multiple chances to do this, and you choose to do it now, 1 week before it's due! You're like one of your bad university students, multiple options to put in the assignment, and you choose now!
Hey, Dr. Clark.
Excuse me, again, I am a university lecturer. Please do, carry on. But the point is, I was going to make...
Trans Franco.
Yeah. But no, I was actually... The reason I've been waiting, Fleet, was I was hoping you would get there yourself. I kept dropping little hints in our conversations, because I kept bringing up Australia and talking about Australia. And it's only when you're finally a week away, it's kind of like you're a student who's forgotten me, and this is the final time I'm going to see your essay before you submit it. I'm going, well, I've tried to drop you hints, but at a certain... So you find it yourself.
If your idea of helping
the whole point
people
of being a lecturer is to allow the students to find their own path of discovery and learn
This
things
is not a
themselves.
university! I deliberately asked for help, and your idea of help was dropping hints! So vague and warped, like... That was your idea of help? I am not one of your university students. I am a colleague and a friend.
Excuse me, but I have learned from a professor who was my supervisor who told me that students learn in a way by osmosis by listening to their lecturers, listening to their advisors. And both me and at least one other person have noticed this hole and been wondering about it for a while.
Then why did nobody say anything? This is
Well,
not...
let's
It's not...
put it this way. Both of us might have the same first name, and both of us might have been sitting there waiting for you to figure it out.
How can Drac have noticed it? He's not been privy to the timeline until today.
Yes, we might have discussed things.
Oy.
We like to have
You're
conversations.
bad at communicating sometimes, Dr. Clark. I do not do subtlety. I do not do subtlety. It's just, no, I don't do subtlety. You have to be as blunt as a brick, otherwise I just don't get it. I don't do subtlety, it doesn't work.
I'm come from an academic tradition which believes you should read for your degree. Okay? In other words, it's I give skills, I give advice, I give vague hints to go in the right direction, and then I let you find your own path. Because the thing is, it's not my... I am not one of those lecturers who believes I should turn my students into molds of myself. I believe I should give them the skills to become improved versions and the best versions of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So that means I gave you the hints, kept talking about Australia, talking about their navy. I've done whole videos on my channel about the Australian Navy. We've done lots of talking in brew ships where I've picked out the Australian questions in the Cold War and things to talk about.
Oh yes, that's right! Thank you for reminding me, Sea Dodders. I had forgotten about that. This is what I mean with the Red Fleet timeline. It's so bloody confusing, occasionally. I'd forgotten about that.
Which one?
I'd forgotten about the Australians getting a trio of...
Heaven ships.
Yeah, a trio...
No
yeah,
spoilers.
a trio of things that I can't mention.
Well, they should be getting a trio of Aegis ships, probably. But they should also need an aircraft carrier.
I can throw one together.
You may have to at this point. Honestly, just toss them on the... I already spoiled it already. Just toss them on the CVA-01 program. Order one for them as well. That'll make it 4 ships total.
Look, in fairness, we can get quite a good run out of CVA-01 if we're doing what we are doing with them.
Do we? No,
If
questions are
Australia's
not.
getting-
No,
if Australia's-
questions are not closed,
If
Ruinon.
Australia's getting 1, if Japan is getting 2, Britain would probably get
Dr.
3.
Clark! I deliberately avoided saying who was getting what.
I'm surprised India's not buying any.
You haven't read the timeline.
Well, no, I have, but I just think it's kind of becoming like the Light Fleet program, in which case everyone will be buying the new ship rather than buying the old ships and reconditioning them.
Did you not? Never mind. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. Just.
And sometimes it's just fun to wind you up.
Uh,
I'm not a troll. I'm not
I thought.
trolling Fleet Knight. I would never do that. I'm,
Why? Okay.
in some ways, professorizing him.
I don't want to be a professor. I'm not an academic. I just fumble through these things as best I can.
No, but I am an academic, and you are one of my, well, I would say to extent, in a way, a sort of a form of student.
Hey.
Definitely a mentee.
Hey.
So I am mentoring you in the style I know how.
Might I suggest in future?
Dr. Clark,
Might I suggest in future a little less
Yes.
subtlety, please? I don't do subtlety. I think this isn't a bit. I don't do subtlety. I had not picked up on any of the hints at all. It just don't do subtlety. It just doesn't work.
Hello,
on me.
Roman.
You need to be
hey,
as
Dr.
subtle
Clark,
as
you're
a
talking
wet
about
fish in the face.
whole skills
Yes,
development
C.
thing.
Dollars is absolutely right.
Don't worry, we will work
I
on this.
realize that there's some
Right.
actually
Okay. So
overlap between a good
I think
manager
Turrets
and
is trying to ask me a question. Turrets?
More so just a comment. Because what you said about how you develop the skills made me realize that there's some not insignificant overlap between a good manager and the role of a professor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because that's one of the things that, as a good manager, you should be doing is helping to develop the skills of the people under you.
Yeah. There are overlaps. There are overlaps. It's I have always viewed being an academic, being a university lecturer, being a helper student far more about helping, as I said, about helping them become the best version of themselves. I'm not there in the process of creating mini-me's. I'm not in the process of in the desire to create people which all think the same or act the same. I want them to be able to think and act for themselves with the skills the skills they have that are as best as they can be.
hmm trust me, I have no intention of becoming a copy.
Well, no, that would be fundamentally boring.
Oh, God.
I never
Wouldn't it
understand
just?
the people.
Yeah.
I never understand the people who desire things to be just the copies of everything else, and you sit there and go,
Right.
"Why would you want that? That's boring." The joy of humanity is the variety. Imagine the conversations if we were all exactly the same. Just imagine how boring they'd be.
Yeah.
I think this
We'd
thing,
be-
yes.
Okay, so
We'd be a planet of cabbages. We
Ugh.
really would.
all right, so
Yeah.
we have to get on now, folks. We have to get forwards. So Brandon Larson, for his Patreon question, asks. I assume he's merged his two questions into one massive one. Fair enough. You are in charge of a combined CBG SAG in 1987 made of 1 Nimitz, 1 Kitty Hawk, 1 Iowa, 2 Ticonderogas, 2 Virginia-class CGNs, 10 Sprue Cans, 6 OHP Knox-class frigates, 8 SSNs and multiple supplied ships. You are tasked with securing the Norwegian and North Sea in a Cold War gone hot fought conventionally. What's your strategy for going about this mission?
What am I
Well-
fighting?
Presumably the Soviet fleet, I guess. The thing
Well,
is...
no, have they surged a major force? Am I dealing with submarines only? Am I dealing with surface force only? Am I the primary focus of their blackjack attacks? What am I fighting?
It doesn't.
Because that's going to change how I deploy my force.
It doesn't.
Am
say.
I facing the whole shebang?
It doesn't.
In
say,
which case,
sadly.
am
Well,
I
I would
facing?
assume it.
Am I facing the whole shebang while covering for an amphibious reinforcement of Norway? Because then I've got to orientate myself to protect that.
My thought process would be, given that I don't know what I'm up against, I haven't been given a threat assessment. My thought process would be assume the absolute worst. So I would go. I would go with the assumption that they are surging a full force. Like even if this isn't what Brandon intended, if you don't have a threat assessment, you assume the worst of all scenarios. So you assume there
I
are
assume
submarines.
they're both surging a full force, and I'm
Mhm.
having to cover an amphibious force
And
because they're
and there are
retarded.
So it's not
and there are
Hello.
SSNs and there are SSNs and there are backfire raids out.
Yeah, there's everything there, and SSKs probably as well because that's the close
Yeah.
enough range to be there.
Oh god, no, Norwegian
And
Sea.
the
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the North securing the
And the
North Sea.
SSK, and in many ways, the SSKs are more scary than the SSNs because the SSNs make noise. The Soviet ones can never shut their reactors down low enough to actually be quiet, whereas the SSKs can go quiet if they've got no position.
If it's 1987, Victor threes could be a problem. They do get quiet enough.
Well, my question
No,
is,
they don't.
what is Soviet thinking? What is Soviet doctrine at this time?
Soviet.
What would they be
So the
doing?
North Sea is going to be fairly straightforward. The North Sea, you're basically looking at a submersible presence, but that'd be it. Because the Soviets are not gonna. The only time we're going to encounter serious Soviet opposition is trying to push into the northern Norwegian Sea. Because at that point, you are encroaching on the area they're operating in. You're approaching the bastions. That's the only place we're going to start to encounter real opposition.
No, not necessarily. If they pushed out because they're doing an assault on Norway as part of their defense of the bastions, which was part of their idea of their third shock army in that period, I think it's the third shock army. That's the ones which are in the which are the ones at north. The stomping third shock that's supposed to come down through Norway, Norway, and probably Finland and Sweden at the same time. That force is going to require significant amphibious support, a significant surface unit to support its amphibious operations, which means you're going to be dealing with significant surface force, probably centered on. What are we on again?
Even then, that's still Norwegian Sea. The Russians wouldn't be mad enough to send that force into the North Sea, because at that point you're well south of Norway.
Depends how well they're doing. You're in Norwegian Sea, yes. You're in the nicest way. But they could be still doing that, and they could be out to Alesund or Hodvik.
I don't think. I mean, as far from what I understand, the Soviets didn't plan for a full invasion of Norway. They just planned to clear, I think, as far south as just about Narvik, which basically opens up routes for their aviation.
They plan to get to Trondheim. They plan to get to Trondheim.
That's not what. I'm not gonna
That's
say.
pretty far.
I'm not gonna say you're wrong, but I haven't seen.
Narvik is the initial phase of operations. Their aim was always to try and get to Trondheim, because if they could get to Trondheim, if you consider where Trondheim is and how it could support their operations, that would allow them to significantly increase the depth of their bastions.
Yeah, getting to Trondheim though is basically going to require an invasion of Sweden as well. Because trying to fight your way down the Norwegian coast to get to Trondheim is just good lord. That's
you basically
horrible.
are fighting your way south down the E6.
That's just going to result in the third taking it's going to be not impossible, but it's going to be a battered, broken wreck that rolls into Trondheim rather than a fully competent fighting force if it gets there at all.
Well, the third shock army was made up of, let's see, something like 5 motor rifle divisions and a cavalry division at one point.
The problem you've got is that mass is fundamentally useless. All you can really do with it is rotate divisions through to be the point of the offensive, and eventually you're just gonna get them chewed up. There's only so much you can do when your frontage is that narrow and the terrain is horrific as it will be, and especially with the Norwegians knowing that terrain as well as they do, and being able to move in it in ways Third Shock won't be able to. I can see them making a go of Trondheim. I don't think they're gonna get there.
Might not be in the third shock army. I'm trying to remember which army it was.
Let me just check. Oh, I'm sure I I'll kill him for all of 1 second. Unless he's snuck in and I don't. No, he was here for all of a second. Unless I'm blind. I think I'm blind.
Don't worry.
Did? Well, Brandon, we haven't got to that yet. Wait, Brandon, what cruise ship? Oh, it's there. It's hidden. There we go. For some reason, it was actually hidden below Timu's question. It was blocked out. Never mind. I see it now. We'll get to that in a second, Brandon. Don't worry. So, if you could do an extended cruise on any cruise ship, which would you choose and why? The only actual liner left standing on the planet? Queen Mary 2.
That will be
That's
fun.
the only choice.
It really is the only real choice, if I'm going to be honest.
Yeah.
The other cruise ships are just they're so tacky. If you want the
They're
honest answer.
hotels perched precariously on barges.
Yeah, and also, to be blunt, they're also horrific disease carriers. Whereas at least with the Queen Mary, she's not so ram-packed and horrifically at sea all the time that it's not so bad, huh? Okay, so let me see. I suppose we start with Discord. Typical gunnery officer asks thoughts on the FV. Oh my good god. Oof. Oh. Okay. Well, I think I'm doing the. Okay, gunnery officer. I'm adopting my standard gunnery officer policy from now on. You'll get, if there are multiple questions of yours in a row, you'll get the first of them answered, and then the rest will be saved till Friday. And they'll be answered on Friday, because otherwise no one else is going to get a word in edgeways. So, we're going to put them away for use on Friday. But, first question. Thoughts on the FV721 Fox armoured car? Do you think the Fox is better than the Cadillac gauge armoured car in terms of abilities of recon, scout vehicle, versatility, and performance? I have never... The gunnery officer is weird in that he's an American who tries to undermine American performance in terms of armoured vehicles and just systems generally.
I'll say this for the Cadillac gauge. At least it doesn't look like it's going to fall over any time it goes around the corner.
Yeah, very true, very true. Cadillac gauge is also a bit more repurposable, shall we say. You can turn it...
Is it?
Yeah, you can use it as... there are so many turret options. You want a short 76? You got it. You want a machine gun? You got it. You want to use it as a quasi-anti-aircraft vehicle? No problem.
The Fox does get 80 GMs.
It does, but it can't really do the same fire support
It'll
role.
probably still fall over.
Yeah. It can't do the same fire support role that the Cadillac gauge can do. If it's got the 76.
Just to clarify earlier, the 3rd Shock Army isn't the one I was thinking of. It was actually, although it was a significantly large formation, it's actually the 6th Combined Arms Army with the attachment of a very large proportion of airborne, but it had a total of 4, 5, 6, 7 motor rifle divisions in 1988, plus another possibly 7 it could call on in the Leningrad military district.
All I can see
Plus
is that...
a 76th Guards Airborne Division and an armoured division.
All I can see at that point is trying to ram all that mass down an extremely narrow frontage in the Norwegians' backyard. They better hope the Norwegians run out of weapons and ammunition, because they're not getting...
Considering their field, from what I'm reading here from their force composition, they have entire divisions of artillery with them. Lord help anyone standing in front of that.
I'm sorry, but I think you're massively overstating the effect of the mass of that force, given the terrain and the frontage they have to fight in. It's just...
Oh no, they're gonna be having an absolute nightmare of a time. But I just think it will be it's a case of I think it's unlikely they're going to actually achieve Trondheim, but they're going to be aiming for Trondheim. And if I'm a naval commander and I'm going into dealing with that if that's going to be the objective, I have to deal with the fact that that's going to be part of the force I'm going to deal with. And their naval forces will be part of that.
Mm-hmm.
And if they can sucker forces into defending convoys trying to cross the Atlantic, and keep forces doing there, then I can't deploy naval forces to support there on amphibious edge. And if the Norwegians are stuck between the Soviets trying to push troops down E6 and the Soviet Navy trying to use forces to attack from the coast, then suddenly, whilst yes, the Soviets are attacking on narrow frontage, that is quite a bad position for the Norwegians as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're similarly in a tight pinch.
Mm-hmm. Let me just check.
And you were the one who did say worst case scenario.
It's true. I was more saying assume worst case rather than it actually being worst case. As in, if you as a command, like, you know how it is if you're a commander and you don't have good intel, you always assume that you're dealing with the worst case, even if it's not the worst case.
Yes, but let's be honest.
What?
That is pretty much the worst case. The Soviets taking Narvik is actually, to an extent, having looked at the terrain around Narvik and Trondheim. Both are pretty interesting. But taking Narvik is almost more difficult than taking Trondheim.
Yeah, but the difference in Narvik is basically the geographical distance. Getting to Narvik from the Soviet-Norwegian border, especially if you lay the groundwork with an airborne operation at the start of the conflict, is easier.
I'm just going to clarify something. You have been to Narvik, haven't you?
I have not. I've seen you guys there.
I have. The border is not that close unless you're charging straight across Sweden. Or Finland. And mostly it's got to be Finland. And B, and it's definitely not really a good direct road, I would like to actually traverse. But B, if I'm doing an airborne landing, and this is from memory of walking around the place a lot, that ground is rocky and undulating as anything. That's a good way for me to lose a division to broken ankles. And there's a reason why they're doing a very nice. They're doing the ski. I think it was the ski championships on the mountain there. Which I have to say, the mountain is well worth a visit. It's a lovely thing to walk up. It is a lovely thing to walk up.
Yeah, so it's closer, but it's a very defensible position, is what I'm hearing.
It's a position which, if you've got forces there, you can defend it. If you've got forces there, and then when you start to look at around Narvik, you soon find out that there's a very interesting airport/airbase not that far away called #Narvik Lufthafen.
Okay.
Which is yeah. Whereas when you go to Trondheim, and this is going to sound, if the Norwegians listening, they're going to be very upset with me probably saying this, but Trondheim, you want to look at it in comparison, that area was slightly easier, and it's slightly open, and in many ways, because it's further south, they less expect themselves to be attacked. So I'd almost be tempted if I was the Soviets, I'd say, and I've seen some discussions of this as an idea to actually overshoot my air assault. Go for Trondheim, where I can make a far more practical landing with my forces, if I can get them in there. And then swallow up Narvik, etc., because Narvik can't be sustained.
It's possible. It's possible. Right. So we did the Fox. I need to take a quick 5 minutes. Could you answer this question for me, Dr. Clark, if that's not too much trouble?
Yeah, what's the question?
So let's check. 24th. If the Royal Navy Fleet Air Arm are twin-engined fighter and torpedo bomber aircraft, wouldn't they go for a combined gearbox like seen on the Fairlie Gannet in the 50s?
That's a very complicated thing that requires a lot of technology which is developed during the 40s that makes it possible for the 50s. So it's not going to happen early on. There could be some developments because of that that will lead to that, but it's unlikely. It's unlikely at that point. It's unlikely to happen at that point because, again, one of the things that happens is it's not just the development of the gearing and development of the engines and necessary for the gearbox. It's development of the metallurgy necessary to make those gears work. To be able to sustain the pressure, to be able to sustain the teething to make it work. So, yeah, it's not something I see likely happening that much quickly than it did historically, even if had all the best intentions. Right, anyone know what next question is? Let's see how many we can get through
no,
before we
because
get back. Okay. Gunnery officer, what was your next question? Let's see if we can't do a couple of your one more of your horde of questions before we before fleet returns. Just tag me on it if you can. Take a gunnery officer. Pick question 2. Okay. All right. Going back to question 2 from the gunnery officer. Thoughts on the P-39 and the successor P-63? Do you think they're the two worst fighters that a major power in World War II produced and designed? Do you think they're trying to compensate the lack of air performance with 37mm gun? There are many bad fighters in World War II. There are many emergency fighters. And many interesting things. The P-39... Oh, the poor Air Cobra. Or Air Cobra, isn't it? It's just... It isn't the worst aircraft. There are, believe it or not, worse aircraft. And yes, the King Cobra does look like it's got a carbuncle on the back thanks to its air intake.
The Soviets really like the P-39.
Yeah. The fact is the Soviets did like them. And let's be honest, the Soviet Air Force in World War II is probably slightly more interesting. There are some aircraft they're flying which, frankly, are more designed for ramming their opponents than they are for fighting their opponents. There's nothing wrong with that, but that was that's their methodology at that point, and you'd have always hoped that they had something slightly better, something slightly more useful to plan than ramming other aircraft. But yeah, I would say in terms of worst fighters produced in World War II, I think the trouble is, for me, there is also the Skewer dive bomber, which is the Royal Navy to get into service has to claim with the Air Ministry it's a fighter, not a dive bomber, and then they just happen to have Vickers happen to produce a dive bombing site. It's amazing, Vickers that they just happened out of the goodness of their heart to produce a dive bombing site. It's just. Well, I'm sure all of you understand how kind of Vickers that was to be producing under goodness heart with no requirement coming from the government in any way, shape, or form a dive bombing site for an aircraft which had just exact flying characteristics as a Skewer. But technically, the Skewer was designated as a fighter. Now, unfortunately, the Skewer isn't even the worst one because, well, there's also the Rock and the Bolton Paul Defiant, and I'm afraid. In any scenario where you are judging worst fighters of World War II, anything which is a turret fighter probably comes top of the list. So, typical gunnery officer, I can see where you're coming from. They're not the best the Americans produced, but in a world with a Blackburn Rock, they are not the worst fighters of World War II. They are not the worst fighters of a major power in World War II. They just can't be. The Blackburn Rock exists.
Okay, so thank you for taking care of that. I'm much appreciated. The animals never pick times.
I did a couple of other questions as well. I didn't want a gunnery officer's questions.
You weren't supposed to answer any more of his.
What can I say? I'm efficient. You weren't here. I was getting through your question list.
Fair enough. Hey, right. Okay.
Can I just jump in and say hi?
Hello, James.
Hello.
Hi, James.
Hello.
Hello.
Aloha. Guten Tag.
Oh, good. Oi, phew. Where was I? So need to get. So we did a bunch. So we did a Discord, then a YouTube, and then it's back to Discord.
I've just done another Discord. That's why I went to Gunnery Officer.
Okay, so
So it's YouTube turn now. I was just about to do a YouTube one.
okay, so 96831, as the Royal Navy's Fleet Air Arm and RAF's supposed hesitation against twin-engine aircraft is a myth. Where did it start?
Again, their desire against aim against twin-engine aircraft. Well, the trouble is, it's a myth because it comes about from some people post-war trying to come up with something sexy to write about. The sheer number of twin-engine aircraft you have in service with the Royal Air Force throughout the war, including things like the Vickers Wellington, kind of suggests that they rather liked them. It's basically this sounds terrible, but there are colleagues in my profession as historians who will sometimes take the quote of one person, let's say saying that, let's say it's a Air Commodore saying his personal views, I don't like twin-engined aircraft because of X, Y, or Z, and then we'll go, well, because this Commodore has said it, the whole service mustn't have liked it. And you have to deal with that being put in the book. And they're not wrong, because the comment was said. But the reality is, then you go and look at the service and go, well, actually, they ordered thousands of twin-engine aircraft. They used them for this role. They actually specified them on this occasion. So as a service, they obviously, even if they didn't like them, they obviously thought they were useful, because otherwise they wouldn't have bought any of them, would they? And you just come up with that. And it's the world over. I'm sure all of us here have got myths from our own areas of personal interest in history or science or engineering or anything, where the myth has literally come about. The myth just doesn't stack up with reality at all.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And if you want to give some examples, please do, because it's always fun for me to have more examples I can point to when I'm discussing these things with people. It's just when engine aircraft were useful.
Yeah.
Of course they use them.
Brackman asks on Discord, if you could explore any shipwreck in the world, which would you choose and why? Honestly, I want to explore the wreck of Graf Zeppelin off the coast of... I think it's... I'm not exactly
Poland.
sure where she... Yeah, off the coast of Poland. Just because she's not a war grave. She can be poked at and prodded. And it'll be interesting to dive on the only carrier the Germans ever got close to completing.
There's going to be a round robin where we ask everyone what they want.
Of course, yeah. Everyone else can answer the question.
There you go. Go on, please do.
Yeah, so that's what Ramblings is a panel show. It's not just Fleet opens his mouth and everyone else listens.
All right, I've got one. The wrecks of Monmouth and Good Hope off the coast of Cornell.
That is a choice.
They've never been found. I mean, to be perfectly honest, you need some pretty decent survey equipment, and you also need some deep diving ROVs for that one, because it's in roughly about 1,000 meters of water.
Uh-huh.
How about everyone else? Dodders? Turrets?
I haven't got anything on my mind.
I'm trying to think, because I'm not...
Is it the wreck is still around?
Yeah, because a lot of them have sort of decayed.
Been illegally salvaged, yes, I know.
That too.
Hey, it's just... If we talk about illegal salvage, we're just going to get into a massive shouting match because we all hate it, but there's nothing we can do about it, so frustration just goes round.
I don't think that's going to be I don't think that'd be a shouting match. I think that'd be just a massive of us slagging off the world match. It wouldn't be so much a match as a mutual...
From all of us, at that.
Yeah. It'll be a fun evening for us, but not a fun evening for others to listen to.
So, next question.
Yeah, I've got one. Musashi.
Ooh.
Ooh.
Ooh, I like that. That's a
Nice
good
choice.
choice. Yeah.
I mean, who wouldn't want to dive on like the biggest battleship ever constructed?
Yeah. Absolutely. And
It'll
she's
be
in, and she's more intact. I think. Well, I don't know if we found her or not, but I would assume she's probably more intact as a whole than Yamato is. Given
Didn't
she
they
didn't,
both blow up?
given she didn't suffer one of the world's largest non-nuclear explosions on the way down.
I think she did.
I think they both blew up.
Yeah, I think both had mag detonations.
Oy.
Now that you bring up Japanese ships, I'm actually going to
Can
say
I say-
Kaido.
It's the Americans applying high explosive. They are never, if not liberal.
Actually, the wreck has been found.
I've got two modern ones, if I can interject.
Yeah?
USS America, the TV that the Americans decided to sink as a test.
Ooh, yeah.
So it'd be interesting to see how a supercarrier sinks and what condition she'd be in.
That's a good point.
Second one, a little bit spicy. Moskva.
Oh, yes, that's probably a good one.
Maybe Sergei Katov.
Right.
Yeah, let's look at that.
Right. So, next question is from Knight. As a refitted 20,000 ton I'm gonna read this. I'm gonna read this verbatim, and then say what I think he means. 961 asks, as a refit 27,000 ton implacable class into a 34,000 to 42,000 ton carrier, probably get 12 3-inch guns and 5 6-double 14mm Bofors AA guns. Does he mean rebuilding an implacable completely? Does he mean giving it an angled flight deck?
I think he's thinking about giving an angled flight deck, and I think he's applying the Victorious conversion without factoring in the sheer amount of extra metal they had to put in for Victorious' conversion to actually make the vessel hold together, because she suffered so much damage during the war. So the thing is, I don't think it would be that massive. But also,
the reason that
I would say that whilst
got...
Implacable was originally designed as 27,000 tons, I don't think she was actually built to 27,000 tons, and I think she was probably closer to about 30,000 tons on completion. Yeah. So he's probably not wrong in his final numbering of it.
Yeah, but I would go for the lower end of that rather than the higher end. I feel like 42,000 tons is a bit. That's extra.
Yeah, that's a chunk and a half added on.
Yeah.
Yeah, at that point, if you're adding that much, you're talking about putting in a hull section.
Yeah.
You've added in a significant statement to that vessel.
Yeah. So.
At which point, just build a new carrier.
It's cheaper and easier and quicker.
Yeah.
Typical gunnery officer asks on Discord, thoughts on, or do you think the Japanese F2AB fighter is better than the F-16 CD Viper Block 50? So the thing you need to bear in mind is that the F-16, even nowadays, is on the lighter end of the multi-role fighter spectrum, even in its updated variants. The whole thing with the F2AB is that the Japanese took a relatively easy and least resistant path to getting a larger, more general purpose multi-role platform by basically taking the F-16, Japanifying it, and then running it through the printer at 25% size increase. That's a very, very, very simplistic way of saying it, because there was a lot more that went on under the hood, but that is essentially what the Mitsubishi F2AB is. Though I will point out again, I am massively oversimplifying things for the benefit of time. They're not really comparable aircraft in similar role brackets, I'm sorry to say. The F-16 is a much more lighter platform designed for... It is still a multi-role aircraft, but it'd be like comparing... it'd be like comparing a Tornado to a... what's an equivalent air superiority aircraft? Actually, no, perfect. It'd be like comparing a MiG-29 to a Su-27 or 35 on the Russian side. They're both multi-role aircraft, but one is a much bigger, more capable platform. It just is.
I don't think people disagree with that. Well, they possibly will, but, they'll be nice about it.
9631, wouldn't that, not sure what that is, along with Victorious, Audacious, and the four centres have been an adequate carrier force for the 1960s?
I'm presuming he's talking about the
Oh,
Implactables.
it's the same question. Well, that was not clear at all. Wouldn't that, along with Victorious, Audacious, and the four Centaurs, have been an adequate carrier force for the 1960s? Well, first of all, by the time you're getting to the 60s, the Centaurs are, even once they've been angled and catabarred, as the Argentinians found out, and various other powers found out, once you start to get towards even the middle of the 60s, aircraft are becoming heavy enough that light fleet carriers are starting to lose their capability to
If you've got... Yeah, it's basically, if you've got the Implacables and the Audacious, you've got your carrier group, and the Centaurs are just doing LPH roles, amphibious warfare job.
There's a reason.
Yeah,
Here's the thing.
And providing a ship wall against the Treasury, as my good friend Drakenfeld likes to say.
Yeah. So, next question is from Discord, which is... So, get over his... from... Sufficiently Nautical. So, the US doesn't have good gunfire ability for amphibious assaults. There's a line that goes around a bit in the interwebs. How do you rate the US's ability to provide fire support for amphibious assaults? If that's required, they can absolutely do it. The Marine Corps rates the single 5-inch gun of a typical US warship as equivalent to a full battery of towed or self-propelled 155mm guns. That's the level of DACA that the USN can put down. And here's the important thing. Ideally, you really don't want those ships in that close. Because, sure, you may have scouted the shoreline. You may have conducted reconnaissance. All it takes is for you to miss one commander with a very well camouflaged battery of silkworms, and suddenly, oh, those missiles are there within 20 miles, and they're coming, and we need to react now. It's just unneeded risk when you have Tomahawks, and they're there, in your VLS tubes.
I think you're missing the point for fire support and amphibious assault and all those operations. If you're doing a major amphibious operation, you need a level of firepower. You're going to have more than one ship there. There's going to be multiple 5-inch, and they're all going to... They are literally going to be sitting there with weapons hot, ready to fire everything. But I think also, the point that's often made is there is a constant discussion within the US Navy about hull space and what things should be allocated to, what space in a hull should be allocated to what. And one of the reasons why the US Marine Corps is always making the case about them not having enough fire support is to maintain the support they already enjoy having.
Yeah, it's just to make sure the 5-inch guns are still there. And also, even the Navy is even the Navy, even though some of them won't admit it, the 5-inch is a good backup for certain scenarios where a missile may not always be a practical option. Like if
the 5-inch is a good backup for when everything else doesn't work. The 5-inch definitely will work.
It's quite funny that the gun is now basically a warship secondary in the modern era. It's a very good way of putting it, actually.
I would say it's more that gun is again the general purpose asset. Whereas missiles are the special focus weapons, the gun is the general purpose asset. It will have an anti-air role, it can have an anti-surface role, an anti-submarine role. If you have the right shells loaded.
Mm-hmm.
It's your general purpose asset. It's not 100% in anything, but it's a good 70% in most things, and that's a very useful asset to have for when you run out of stuff or just need something to react immediately.
Yeah. But
Also,
like I
it's
said,
quite good for diplomatic signaling when you want to point something at someone, because
oh yeah,
Lord love them, you can't point a VLS tube at anyone.
yeah. This is one of the major downsides of the loss of trainable missile mounts, is that the Soviets used to get a lot of bang out of pointing those at people.
Yeah.
And they can't do that anymore because they've moved away from that. But yes, you can point a gun at people, and I don't think guns are going to go away anytime soon. It's important to bear in mind that basically the US ships will be providing gunfire until basically the Army or the Marines has batteries ashore, even if it's literally on the beach deployed. Then the warships are going, right, we're withdrawing to missile range, you have your own guns now, bye. Because here's the thing, in the modern era, having a warship that close into shore is incredibly dangerous, even if you've swept everything. That's a very valuable asset very close to an enemy's coastline. And unless you have absolute overmatch,
the point of ships is you risk them. That is, they're having a ship and expecting it to take no risk.
No, it's not. That's not what I said. What I mean is,
the thing at that point is you actually don't withdraw those ships until two scenarios. One, there's been a change of operational command ashore, not when there's been just a battery ashore. So you firstly have to change your operational command. When the amphibious commander has handed over command from him to the Marine Forces commander ashore. That's standard NATO doctrine, so those ships aren't going to them. And as long as you're still resupplying that area, you're still providing key supply, again, there is going to be a warship on sentry duty, a la Falklands War. So, whilst, yes, it is, I do agree, it is not safe, it's not a good position to be in, they're going to be there. It's just what happens.
Gunnery officer. Oh no, hang on. No, I have to go to YouTube. Nearly, Fleet. You nearly clobbered yourself. Nearly clobbered myself there. Knight 683.
You're doing well.
Knight 6831 asks. I'm gonna let you handle this one, Dr. Clark, because you can probably make this short, sharp, and quick. Knight 6831 asks, would it be right to think that computer-assisted action information systems and action data automated weapon systems will be more advanced than historical if you have no treaty and decades of RN automation?
No. Because you're forgetting that the fire control systems that we were developing at that time were analog systems.
Automation is.
There's a limit. You would develop very good systems. You'd have very good analog systems, but also they do carry on working on them. The fuse clock 2 and all these things come about during that time period. They're just as keen to work on them, even without the Washington Treaty, because one of the things is the Washington Treaty might limit London Treaty might limit your ability to build ships. It doesn't limit your ability to make those ships more lethal by having better fire control. In fact, that becomes a bit of a race. Kind of like the horsepower race in aircraft and air engines, there's a whole fire control table race, which is why the ships get so accurate by World War II. But the thing is, you have to rebuild the fire control systems every time you have an advance in computing. And just wait till quantum computing becomes stable enough that they think they can fit it on a ship. Then we're going to be rewriting fire control like anything. Again. And quantum computing is fun.
Yep. Where was I? So the next question is from Typical Gunner Officer. Since he's asked this question twice, I'll pick this one for his section. Thoughts on the Scorpion light tank? Do you think it's the most perfect light tank that NATO had since it's not too big, but it's versatile enough to be a recon and support tank? And why didn't the US copy the light tank dropped in the British used with the Scorpion? Okay. First things first, the Scorpion is a light tank in the loosest sense of the word. I'd more actively I'd call the Scimitar and the Scorpion basically they're light reconnaissance and fire support platforms that have they're not really. They're not
They
really.
have enough firepower to try and get themselves out of trouble if they're in the
Yes.
forward elements.
Yeah, but
They're
they're
there
not.
to try and stop you, get your forward elements out of trouble. They're not there to get themselves into trouble.
Yeah, they're not really like a light tank. Even in the modern era, has the concept of perhaps getting itself into trouble. The Scorpion and the Scimitar, no.
They're ambush predators as well. The CVRT is an ambush predator.
Yeah.
It always was. But also, the big killer of the CVRT was not the Scorpion or the Scimitar.
Well, they are just the turreted fire support variants, or the turreted arms variants.
It was the Striker which was the killer version of them. Do you know which one the Striker was?
Oh, that's the one with the the 6 swing fires on the back in it.
Yeah. Basically, the whole point was you would have the Strikers sitting behind the reconnaissance elements, the various Spartans and other system and Samaritans and Scorpions, etc., going forward doing their reconnaissance role. And if they spotted something which was going to be a threat, beep beep, Strikers, target at this location, eliminate.
Yep.
Wingfire missiles. And by the way, look up the Swingfire missile. It is a beast of a weapon system.
Yep. So,
For its period.
very
It's
quickly.
a beast.
Very quickly as well, on the second part of your question as to why the US didn't copy the light tank doctrine the British used with the Scorpion, because the US Army is not the British Army.
They have their own ideas on how to do things.
Yeah.
And they developed the Bradley.
Yeah, and the Bradley is terrifying. Even today, the Bradley is still terrifying.
Yes. Many, many variants later. It's still terrifying.
See, this is the thing. When the US Army decides to upend its doctrine on how it handles mechanized infantry because of the vehicle they're adopting, you better really think why they've done that.
And honestly, the thing about the CVRTs is they are a great idea. And in many ways, I do wish they'd managed to be built on as a concept, and we managed to build something, an Ajax
We do
family
still
and a
use
sort of
them.
Boxer family based on. We are still using them, but the fact is they're being replaced. In part, one of the reasons why we've had so much trouble building replacements for them is because we were looking for them, but didn't want to specify them.
Yeah.
Also, it's quite hard to fit all the defensive measures and new technology for protecting the crew inside and keep it under 9 tons.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, it is.
It has a point there. Yeah.
It is, but the thing was, when they built the CVRTs, they accepted that. They accepted that because they said, well, in a nice way, we'd like to have these crew, we want some protection in there for the crew, but if we keep them small, they can hide, and if they hide, that's their best defense. Whereas with the new, when we've been specifying the new ones, we wanted to put all the protections in.
But now the only thing that can carry them is C-17.
Yeah, and they can't really hide.
That was the great thing about the CVRT family, because he essentially airleft a light airmobile mechanized division in Hercules.
Yep.
Oh yeah. Well, the most fun thing was the Falklands War, where I do love one of the conversations which Brigadier Thompson had and Michael Clapp had was they were told, oh yes, the roads aren't specified. They can't take more than 12 tons on the road, so we can't take any tanks or anything with us. And there was a household cavalry officer that just happened to be nearby and went, oh, my tanks can do that. And that's why they have the Blues and Royals come down.
Yep.
Because literally, they go, well, yeah, ours are 9 tons, we can do this. And they have an absolute field day in the Falklands War.
Yep.
Although they'd love to take some strikers with them, they didn't realise they didn't really get the ones they really would have liked to have. Because if you had the strikers, you could have eliminated some of the Argentine positions with just a single blast, rather like Hellfire used for today.
Mm-hmm. So,
if I'm a bit muffled, I've got a poodle lying on top of me.
Yeah, that I figured as much. Knight 6831 asks, so if the British pay off their debt to the US along with everyone else with the amount of gold from the asteroid, what happens? Well, we Me and Dr. Clark, we
We
answered this question
we discussed
yesterday,
that.
didn't we?
But I'm going to explain in a little bit more detail because some people are wondering what do I mean by it would cause trouble in the economy. So basically, if you consider the example of when one of the richest kings in Africa went on pilgrimage to Mecca, and as he passed through Egypt, he actually spent so much gold because he was the king of Timbuktu.
No, Ghana.
That
King of Ghana.
Yes. I think he was from Timbuktu, though.
No, it was Ghana. Well, yeah,
It was Ghana, okay.
well, Timbuktu was the capital of Ghana, but he was the king of the Ghanaian Empire.
Yes. Well, yeah. Okay. That's correct. But anyway, as he passed through, he spent so much gold that it actually causes the prices to rise and inflation because there's too much liquidity in the economy.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, if the British pay back all their debts immediately, that is going to overload the American economy with liquidity. So it's rather like quantitative easing. And what did the quantitative easing cause? Inflation. And that's what you get. If you put too much liquidity into an economy, too much cash into an economy, it will cause a massive inflation because it devalues the cash.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, if it can cause actually a global economic downturn by literally paying off debt too fast.
Yep.
On a nation-state scale. It's still good as an individual to pay off your debt as fast as you can, okay? You as an individual doing it won't wreck the global economy. But the debt we're talking about on the scale of nation-states post-World War II, that can wreck global economies.
Yes, and at that point you're talking about an effect that will rebound back to Britain and basically undo all the work they've just done.
Well, it will and it won't. Britain would probably adjust itself to the gold standard, and as it has so much gold, it'd probably be okay. It probably would actually survive it. It's the one time where a gold standard might actually make sense. But Britain would have to admit they had the asteroid, and they had the gold to weather it, and that could cause problems on another level. But this is sometimes some of the things when people are thinking about it, it's the consequences of paying back debt too fast. You have to. It's a strange thing to think about, but it can actually cause problems when you're on a scale of a nation state.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Left.
I knew you were going to say that. How did I know you were going to say that? Sad face. Right. Okay. So
I'm just going to put a poodle in the garden. I'll be listening, but I'm putting a poodle
idea.
in the garden.
Brackman asks, "What's the most fascinating maritime innovation or piece of naval technology you've come across, and why does it intrigue you?" If we're going to be completely honest, in terms of I've come across, it's probably the naval mine in its various forms. That it just sits there for ages and ages and ages and ages. And because it's not like a landmine where, yeah, you put it in the ground and it's going to sit there and it'll probably be okay. You've got to keep that thing in water for years, possibly, and have it still function if something hits it or runs into it or comes into its magnetic sphere of influence. That's not exactly easy. Especially when you consider how early the mine actually comes into service. During the Crimean War is the first of them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say the mechanical clock. The H1 through whatever number he got up to. I mean, really anything to do with navigation is when you're in a featureless terrain is interesting to me. But that specifically, the clock was so revolutionary in terms of the ability to get places.
Mm-hmm.
To be fair, actually, learning about navigation at college, one forgets how hard it is to actually navigate from one place to another place in the middle of the ocean. People think it's quite easy, but actually when you break it down and look at the mathematics behind everything, it's really impressive.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And just how much knowledge had been built up to allow them to even do that.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of science behind that.
Mm-hmm.
Although, I had to say I was having fun earlier because Oh, one of the things you learn through history is that we often ascribe discoveries of things to when people discover systems to do those things rather than doing them by human, by whatever instinct, etc. And that really does cause some people to have mysteries where they go, well, look, we didn't know how to do this till we developed we didn't know how to navigate. Someone's actually putting forward a YouTube video where we didn't know how to navigate the world's oceans until we had this clock. And you go, no, they were navigating the world's oceans, not as successfully, not as safely, but they were doing it before they had the clock.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the clock made life a lot easier. And it's I don't know. Someone's basically suggesting that the Royal Navy of the Age of Sail era was blessed by aliens or something, which is how they were navigating their fleets around and were beating people. I just, well, YouTube. I just told YouTube to mute that channel, never show it to me again. I just felt it better for my blood pressure.
Oh wow. That's the first time I've ever heard you openly do that.
I honestly, there are days when I decide there are windmills I can tilt out and people I can help, and there are days when I look at it something and I just go,
Remind me again, which channel? I know I heard it the first time, but I just need it reminding into my brain so I don't forget it. So I don't. Which one was it?
I didn't say which channel. I specifically did not give its name.
Oh.
I'm specifically avoiding giving its name.
Oh, I see.
But it was basically, as said, it was saying that there was no navigation because before the clock.
The Portuguese would like a word.
Yes,
The
there are lots
Philippines
of
would
people.
like a word.
The Chinese would like a word. There are lots of people who would like words on that one.
Uh-huh.
I've got a good one to add to the list.
Go on then.
The advent of electronic warfare.
Ooh.
Yeah, coming out with the cool ones tonight, aren't I?
Oh yeah.
Now, the ability to convert radio signals into and radar signals into numbers, which then can become fingerprinting, which you can then identify vessels via their unique fingerprinted radar.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. It's cool.
It is always fun.
Excuse
Never
me.
look at radar the same way, though.
Very.
It's also one of the things that's is always kind of interesting to get into because it's one of those areas, especially of World War II, which is still very much not really got into and talked about. And it's like I always laugh because people talk about Bletchley Park, and what they don't realize is that whilst the code breaking, all these things have been in some ways released to the public. In some ways, it has been stopped being so much of a secret. All the signals traffic analysis algorithms and systems used for signals traffic analysis and all that stuff hasn't been. So the work which took up 2/3 of Bletchley Park, nope, we aren't discussing that yet. We know it happened there. We know it happened at other places as well around the UK. We know how much effort was put into it, but no, they're not talking. That's not going to be discussed at all.
Yeah, it's because some of it's probably still in use today, isn't it?
Yeah, that's basically it. Basically, just tells you all you need to know. You go, okay, so it's either it's possibly not the same thing still in use, but they're probably the base of the things still in use to this day.
Oh yeah, definitely. Ah, yes.
Yeah.
The secret side to warfare that people forget about.
Yes, and we like them forgetting about it. It's basically the code of those people who do that. We'd like them to forget as quickly as possible, preferably.
Anyone else?
No, I think Fleet's
So-
off doing minor adventures. So, next question.
Yes,
While Fleet's
Timu-
away.
No. Who said anything about moving away? Haha. Sorry, but the reason I had to go very sharpish was dog was being aggressively noisy. So I had to go and see why the dog was being aggressively noisy.
Is it because you haven't fed the dog?
No, dog has been fed. Turns out that she saw another dog at the front window and decided that it would be a good idea to make all the noise.
As you do.
So, next question is Timu. How strong are the Finnish in the Red Fleet timeline? No substantial change from historical, because there's...
You really? The Finns?
They might have a few more boats, but there's not much you can do in the Baltic.
No, they really need to focus on a lot of their defensive thinking has to be as historical. Land and air. At sea, they need basic deterrence capability and sovereignty retention capability, like they had historically during the Cold War, with the majority of their coastal defense.
They probably have more of what they had.
Yeah, but not...
Because what they had would work in the Baltic.
Yeah, but they don't need any significant large assets, like frigates or anything else. They need more of what they got historically.
I
That's the
think the
background.
Finns would have a battleship.
No, Dr. Clark. I've let you strong arm in British battleships in the 90s. I've let you strong arm in other
Brothers,
things.
What do you agree with me?
No,
Brothers,
no,
winking
I'm
at
putting-
you. Do you
no,
agree with
I'm
me?
putting
It'd
my
be a
foot-
battleship for the
I am
Finns, wouldn't
putting
it?
my foot down. No.
What's this about a missile battleship?
No.
Oh yes, I think definitely the Finns.
No,
Let's be honest. The Finns are going to have something which is going to have a surfeit of armor. It's basically going to be fast because the Baltic is, it can't really, operate if it's that big, that fast. But it needs to have armor and a lot of missiles
Clark,
and
I'm
basically
trying
be
to
a floating hegemon.
I'm trying to at least dance on the edge of realism here.
Seedle, did you say missile spheria?
No, stop it. Stop it. No.
I think
Moving
also
on.
you have to remember
Moving
the
on.
Finns do operate these very large guns.
Moving. Yes,
The
that's
Finns do operate very large guns in their shore batteries.
moving.
Hydrofoil battleship, Fox.
Hey.
That'd be really
No.
interesting. And
No.
that would allow them to actually be quite fast.
Nope.
Oh, that could be interesting.
Nope.
Interesting.
To hop in.
Nope.
So hydrofoil battleship,
No.
because it can go into shallow waters by
No.
raising itself out of the water.
No.
Oh, yes, of course.
No.
Mm.
You are officially entering
And that'd be
silly.
very scary.
You are officially entering silly territory now, gentlemen. And Foxo.
Okay.
Moving
shall
on.
I bring this down slightly more to more
Moving
of a normal level?
moving on.
Okay.
So next question. Which is
But I'm sure the Finnish Tomcats are very good.
hey.
Let's be honest, they needed a decent air defense fighter.
Uh,
What better for them than a Tomcat?
Gunner Officer asks, why didn't the US Army adopt the vehicle-launched Hellfire missile on their ground vehicles like on the Humvee or Striker as their tank destroyers? Do you think the two-armed Striker is still better for the future? Well,
Hellfire's fire and forget.
I don't exactly know why they didn't adopt the Hellfire, but they must have had their reasons.
They had about 1 million toes in storage.
And they still have 1 million toes now. And the toe is cheap and reliable and there and does the
It
job.
works.
Why do we?
Ask the Ukrainians, the toe works.
The toe still, especially toe 2, is still the best anti-tank missile.
And
on the
we're getting
planet, where they use Hellfire.
And we're getting toe 3. And the Hellfire is an extremely good asset for use from aircraft because of its characteristics. And therefore, why would you take them away from that fleet when you already have an existing fleet of ground-based assets that are perfectly adequate, in fact, more than adequate, for the role they do?
Well, there is a use case for ground-launched Hellfires. The fact that they are fire and forget, but they are about 3 times the size.
Yeah, they are. The Hellfire is a chunky missile, by the way. Let's not forget. You can see there from the size of the thing.
And basically, it's when they start bringing back something like the Swingfire and going, yeah, we like something this size, tells you that they're dealing with some chunky threats.
Yeah.
Until then, no.
Yeah. The Hellfire is a big missile as well. Its size as well, that is the factor. Admiral Wellesley asks, realistically, would the German Empire use the name Prince Eugen? Yeah, probably.
They did. They did. So yeah.
Wanted to get that question squared away nice and quick. Ruinon, what is the appropriate solution for a foreman who is telling me to break building code because I said so? Down tools, go and speak to your union rep, or down tools and go and speak to a manager above the foreman. I'm sorry,
I'd go
it's that
speak
simple.
to. If I remember correctly, you're doing a union job, Runon. Go to your union rep and
Immediately.
explain to them what's going on immediately, and just watch them go. Look at your foreman and go. So they're trying to evaluate your union membership by making you do something against code. Yeah. Oh, for a union
Knight,
job, that'll be fun. As well.
Knight, we're talking about the Red Fleet timeline Finns, not the present day Finns.
Oh, the present day Finns do operate massive guns, though.
Yeah, no, I know, but he's saying the Finns will want a fast armored ship because the Americans are an unreliable ally. That's you can't.
Wow.
First of all, the Finns aren't even in NATO at this point. It's the 1990s. It's the Cold War generally. The Finns aren't in any alliance structures to begin with. So they're not even an American ally. So, what is your point here, Knight? It just feels like
I'd also say that American governments come and go, and believe it or not, they have countries are not always considered to have reliable governments in terms of their alliances. Is the country usually reliable? Is the thing what you're talking about, because procurement is based on a 20-something year cycle.
Mhm.
Individual countries' leadership can change every couple of years. You know, it's not something that really factors into it as much.
And again, even if it was, Finland wasn't a part of NATO in the period under discussion. So
No.
That's a bit too close to modern politics, I think.
no, I'm allowed. No, modern politics is something we discuss on ramblings on the regular. It's
Yeah, but the difference between modern politics and modern politics.
yeah, we got as close as I like to get with that, and that's it.
Yeah.
What kind of ship would you want to add to Sins 2? Brackman asks on Discord. Well, basically, well, honestly, we have the 3 major factions. We have all the ships ported over from Sins 1. There aren't really any gaps. There aren't really any gaps in the factions as they currently stand. You're basically looking at a new faction at that point, because I can't really think of anything that I would want to add that's missing from any of the major factions. Because they've got
Fire ships.
even then, you've got extremely heavy missile boats, and you've got, and again, a fire ship is very much honestly a waste if you want my honest answer.
I have a mod for that.
So next question
Stop being
is
cruel to
from
Foxo and have fond dreams of fire, of burning things.
Night Six.
Doing that one prequel move just against starbases.
Knight 6831 asks, is the de Havilland Sea Hornet basically the Royal Navy's fleet air-armed twin-engine fighter they would have been aiming for if they had not been stuffed over by the treaties and bad decisions? Knight,
It's not the treaties which could. It's basically, well, you can say it's bad decisions, because honestly, converting the admirals into aircraft carriers would have been a very good idea and was considered. But the fact is, it doesn't happen. So, basically, that one's David Beatty, and it might be something they would have been. It's a conjecture of mine and Drax working together and thinking through that we think they'd have ended up with twin-engined aircraft. But it's a nice way, if you follow mine and Drax logic and our logic proved true, then that is what would have ended. That is what we think would have. What we think you could have ended up with, something not too dissimilar to what the eventual Sea Hornet did look like.
I will also point out, though, that while just because Drac and Dr. Clark have followed their train of logic and reached a certain conclusion,
doesn't mean we're right. It's just it's our logic train, and that's the thing it should be seen. This is why I always refer to it as our logic train, and I give us equal credit.
Yeah,
because we in the nicest way. The story goes that it comes about with us wandering around Yeovilton Fleet Air Museum and looking at a model of a converted a large battle cruiser and looking at a conversion, stood next to it and just thinking, well, hang on, what happens if the admirals? And then I did some research, and I remembered my own PhD thesis where I'd found out all the conversion stuff from the Camel Lairs. Put that together, went through, found out the admirals had been discussed about being converted. We can't find a design to the conversion, but we base it on the fact that the Eagle's conversion design was based apparently on it. Gives us an idea of what sort of things we'll be looking at. And, that's what we're based on. But it's entirely mine and Drax's logic train of, well, the Fleet Air Arm's probably not going to they're going to, find out quickly that operating 120 aircraft from a carrier don't work. And once you strip it down to about 96 aircraft, you've got all this space for these aircraft. You might as well have twin-engined aircraft. Because if you look at the things they need to, but it's our logic train. And we do look at, because eventually the Royal Navy does drive the desire for the Sea Hornet. Why? Because they want an all-round general-purpose aircraft. And that's then what drives their procurement for the next... Well, throughout the jet age, they're always looking for an all-round general-purpose aircraft. Finally they've got one, the F-35B.
Mm-hmm. It took technology a while to catch up with requirement, but we got there in the end.
Yeah.
I mean, weren't you there for last night where Clark very well defended the idea of the twin-engined aircraft?
At night, I hate to be that guy, but the Finns bought a lot of equipment from Russia during the Cold War. Because they're right
bought
there.
equipment from everyone because it also helped with them being prepared for everyone. Because theoretically, they are preparing to fight both sides.
Yeah, because one of the whole points is that the reason that the Finns and the Russians actually during the Cold War get along fairly well, and it's only recently that we have the problem, is that the Finns' neutrality was respected by the Soviet Union during the Cold War, and as such they were seen as a reliable partner to get arms from, just as the West was seen as a reliable partner because they also respected Finnish neutrality during the Cold War.
Imagine that as a
remember that
concept.
a lot of the demands on Finland for being forced to buy Soviet stuff was from treaty, from the continuation wars.
Yeah.
Stuff like the Soviet Union respected the Finns' neutrality because they had to fight with them in the UN. They had to buy Russian equipment when they bought Western equipment, and I think it's all their armored vehicles had to be.
Not all of them. They did. They had leeway on that. They bought some from the Swedes, some from the Germans.
Yeah, but they weren't allowed to buy from the Western Allies.
No, they were. The Germans.
Not for major armored vehicles. It's why you see stuff like them using T-55, BTRs, BMPs, because they were forced to by treaty.
And I will also point out that the Russians are right there. And
yeah, they were also being tied. They were also the singular foe of Finland.
Yeah, the Finns did tend to, how do I put this politely, modify these things.
Yeah, they played all sides. Like, the Russians knew that they had some leverage, but it was nowhere near enough that they actually go, we're not sending you stuff, therefore you're not going to get anything. Finland, okay, that's fine. We'll just, oh yeah, Russia, by the way, we've traded out all of the guns in the tanks you gave us, and the IFVs for Western equivalents, and we're just going to get stuff from them. Do you really want to cut us off, or do you want us to keep actually putting valuable foreign exchange into your markets? Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, but, I mean, kinda, but there was always the implication of Finland stops playing ball.
Yeah, I think
the Red Army crosses the Mannheim line again. And it's not the Red Army of the 1930s.
Yes, but that's not really.
Yes, but also it's not the Finnish army of the 1930s. Let's be honest.
Yeah, Timu literally gets it right in a nutshell. As Finny says, quite frankly, and he's quite right. They mastered the balancing act perfectly. He's absolutely right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did read an alternate history story that had both the NATO and USSR nuking Finland in World War III because nobody was entirely sure which side they were going to land.
Yeah, that's been mooted a fair number of times. If in doubt, nuke the Finns.
Even South Park made a bloody joke about it.
Well, usually South Park is also about who you're going to use as a human shield in the next war.
That is very true.
I mean, it makes sense, nuking Finland. So right next to Leningrad.
So that was okay. So that wasn't even a question. That was us talking to Knight quickly. So Knight61, how much does on YouTube asks how much does losing a lot of the Queen Elizabeth class battleship development documents hurt our knowledge of them? I don't really have the information to make a call on this.
I imagine if we don't have the documents, it hurts knowledge of them.
It has an impact, but it's one of those things of with the Queen Elizabeths, we are blessed in a lot of personal documents and personal resources, so we're able to fill in some of the gaps to an extent. But one of the things you always have to remember is that there's no class for which we have a perfect surviving record. And the major gap in the Queen Elizabeth records come from things around the Agincourt, which is why it leads to the joy of all the conjecture and fun that me and Drac regularly have about what exactly she was going to be. Because we know she wasn't going to be a regular Queen Elizabeth, because their actual reason for stopping her is because because apparently that it's not the technology is they're not ready for it. They can't implement the technology, and considering the yard she's built Queen Elizabeth herself. If she's not, if she was a standard Queen Elizabeth, then why would that yard be having any issues with implementing the technology?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know, they literally had built Queen Elizabeth. I think they could build a carbon copy without too much trouble.
Your typical gunnery officer asks, thoughts on the F-5 Freedom Fighter? Do you think its purpose in the USAF was an Op-4 fighter jet in exercises since its lightness represented Soviet fighters? Honestly, that's partially the reason the USAF procured the F-5. And partially it was to shut up a certain group within Congress. We all know who we're referring to.
It's also, it's going to sound strange, it's quite useful to have a low-run production of such a light aircraft, because it's kind of like the the people who make the ejection seats. Who are they called? They're called Martin Baker. The Martin Baker fighter produced by Britain during World War II. It was a light fighter which was in a design in reserve, which could go into production, which was very easy to produce in large numbers if Britain got invaded. And it's the same with the F-5. It's a kind of, okay, if war starts tomorrow, what can we produce very quickly? What is very simple, very easy to produce? It's going to give us a basic level of air support.
Yeah.
A basic level of operation. And that's the F-5. So you keep the science going like that.
It was also a very good export success.
Scorpion was a couple of years, yeah.
And there's still 400 in service with the United States Navy and United States Marine Corps today. 3,800 of all marks were built. Like, that is not...
The British do something similar to Hawk.
Yeah.
That's basically another reason the Hawk's built.
Yeah.
Not just to provide an aircraft for the red alerts.
The F-5 was basically the F-5 is basically the West going, see that MiG-21? We're gonna take his export market success, and the F-5 went and throttled its way into the Western aligned export market in a similar multi-role role to the MiG-21. It still serves in that sort of role today. The difference is that there's still support for the F-5, given it's still in aggressive service in the US, and various air forces are still maintaining the F-5 as a combat platform.
The F-5 doesn't actively try to kill you as your pilot.
There is that as well.
I do feel the need to contest a slightly earlier point you made about the F-5 fleet.
Which one?
The F-5 is designed in the 60s.
You do
so the 50s, the late 50s.
Mm-hmm.
That's when those people still have a point. Not like in the 70s and 80s where they don't.
Foxo, as usual, has got you.
I hate giving those people any credit, though.
Those people become so bad because they refuse to accept that things have changed.
Mm-hmm.
But when they get their power, they have a point.
So skip those. And then also it has to be a YouTube question anyway, so... Knight 681, in Star Trek Enterprise Season 4, two-part of Stormfront, the NX-01 fights Ju-87s. How outmatched are the Stukas against the badly damaged NX-01 Enterprise? I mean, honestly, I hate to be that guy, but the show it exists. That fight actually takes place. This isn't a hypothetical. The Ju-87s have alien laser cannons in the place of their 37mm cannon, and Enterprise is incredibly badly damaged. So it's basically eventually she would have suffered death by 1,000 cuts had she not just killed the time portal.
Yeah.
To be fair, the NX-01 is... How do I put this politely? It's always so badly... it always seems to be doing badly. It's probably the worst armed ship the Earth forces Starfleet could put into service.
It's basically it's a science.
Basically the first.
It's a
let's
science.
cut them a little slack.
It's a science and exploration vessels. It's a science and exploration vessel with delusions of being a warship.
Well, I remember looking at it going, okay, so if you're designing anything for redundancy, you don't have enough phase cannons, you don't have enough torpedo launchers, you're supposed to be doing long-range patrols into the unknown, where you can come across hostiles if you're going into the unknown, you can come across people who shoot first, ask questions later, Klingons, you can come across people who are absolute... a-holes, Romulans. You can come across people who are absolute capitalist insanity, Ferengi. There are all sorts of options. You need you need sensible firepower.
My take
they don't have
on the NX-01 is the same take I have on Bears. It's not great, but considering they are building it as the prototype to learn how to build starships, we can cut it some slack. They know it's not going to be good.
Yes.
That's why they're not going into serial production.
It's like saying HMS Dreadnought is a bad Dreadnought because it's not a Queen Elizabeth or an Iowa. It's like they are just learning how to Dreadnought.
No, please do not get in that scenario, because Dreadnought doesn't have Dreadnought has redundancy in her fire plan. Dreadnought has all-round fire security. Dreadnought has positions. I don't agree with the wing turrets. I don't agree with lots of things on Dreadnought, but Dreadnought is not as bad as the USS Enterprise NX-01.
I think we're all forgetting the fact that she is NX-01, which means experimental.
Yes.
Would it be more like taking HMS Beagle into Trafalgar?
That's true. That is true.
Yeah.
But there again, she probably uses signals for getting Trafalgar, so she probably did quite a good job.
So...
I mean, okay. Is there anything better currently in the United Earth Navy?
No. But that is just the whole Navy is pretty darn terrible.
Online, that's a big capability, but NX-02 is still it's like 4 years after NX-01.
And they seem to have learned their lesson and gone, oh, we're going to get attacked. We go, no, we better actually have some weapons in decent covering positions.
Yeah.
Right. But don't you think they also learn their lesson as the class goes on? Because don't forget that
NX-01 refits.
Got a secondary hull.
I mean, don't forget NX-01 refits. Yeah, like when you get the refit NX-01, suddenly you're like, oh, this is a full-on line warship now. It's basically because of the NX-01 refit program and the new builds that come out of that as well, in addition to refits, that the Romulans go, oh, what do you mean we can't just overwhelm NX-01s now? What do you mean we actually have to try and fight?
What do you mean this is what happens when humans get pissed off?
Yeah.
Can you imagine trying to...
NX-01, as we see her, is not very good. As refit for the Romulan War, that's a much better ship.
Yeah. Right. So.
And I cut her slack because she's the prototype.
Yeah. So, can we?
I also would like to say that I feel that the biggest loss from Starfleet that comes from that period is the loss of the Makos. I think the Makos should have been retained by Starfleet. I don't think they should have been folded in Starfleet security. I think they were an important, essential part of Starfleet, and they should have been there, and we should have been able to see them in the Dominion War, because I think Makos by that period would have absolutely creamed the Dominion.
Okay. So.
Because the Makos were actually good.
Okay. So. Brackman asks, what current force would have a good chance at the Battle of Hoth if they replace the Rebels? The Empire will not be able to launch an orbital bombardment due to the existing energy shield. You've been watching a certain Australian YouTuber, haven't you?
Huh?
G'day.
Yeah, I watched that one too.
Yeah, you've been watching... Oh, I'll go and find it.
Was it a Finnish mechanized brigade?
No, it was a Norwegian. It was a Norwegian... Yeah, so it's CSRC basically took a Norwegian, and I'm just going to check which brigade it actually is. They are taking... I'm not sure exactly which Norwegian brigade it is, but I think it's their Arctic brigade. And it basically was... I mean, I would... Honestly, if you want an answer to answer this question, go and watch CSRC's video, Modern Tanks vs. AT-ATs, because they do a fantastically detailed job of it.
There it is.
It's
the Telemark Battalion.
Yeah, Telemark Battalion. And I'm seriously, it's just... Go and watch that, because it is Perun levels of detail for what is perhaps a somewhat silly question. But the way it's done just makes me want to just go, mwah, beautiful. Because it kind of is, in a way. But yeah, so go and watch that video and answer that question, because that does it far better justice than I ever could. And honestly, the guy's only got, he's still a fairly smallish channel. He still deserves a lot of the views he gets for that. Don't listen to me ramble on about it. Go and watch that video. It just does it much more justice than I ever could.
Have you seen the other one?
I have, yeah. Mordor and the Aussies. Yeah, that's a good one. Geneva.
Yeah, that was a fun one, but of course didn't involve the most fun force.
No, it should have been.
Should have put in the
Yeah, it should have been the Canadians.
Yes, it should have been the Canadians, who would be adding more to the Geneva suggestion list.
Nah, there ain't no Geneva conventions in Middle Earth.
You mean the Geneva checklist?
Timu Locker asks,
Yes.
can we have some fleet merch soon without the Hosh? Well, first of all, there probably will have to be Hosh merch, because, well, it wouldn't be fleet merch without the Hosh, but there will be merch without the Hosh. But again, I'm
still waiting for you to publish a book on the Hosh.
I don't earn nearly enough from this. Well, first things first, it needs to become a...
Have you set up some merch on your Patreon yet?
No.
So people at different levels of Patreon get merch. You should do. That's the first thing you should do in this sort of merch. To get an idea of merch.
I can't afford to set up merch. I don't have the financial reserves right now.
You don't have to on Patreon. They do it for you. You upload the designs. They send it in. You just have to factor in the cost into the level of membership. So basically, if people have an increased higher level membership, they get merch. This is how I originally set up my first generation merch, which is why I have the tiers on Patreon.
I'll look into that then. I will look into that.
Have a look up the tiers of Patreon I have, and you'll find out that it's different. And I have one tier which I actually have written in it. I have created this entire tier not because I think anyone will ever actually have it, but because I wanted to design my first hoodie. And work out how to use it. And then I went to set up a Spreadshirt shop. And, then I did that. And again, I didn't have the backup to set that up and get support my merch, so Spreadshirt does it all.
Mm-hmm.
And I just take a small amount off the top.
Yep.
And that is, for me, even in my channel, my size, is about £50 a month. Which is a book.
Yep.
I think I need to do that.
Oh no, I will absolutely set that up, but I'll just, like I say, I'll have to. I wasn't aware that was an option, so I'll get on that. I'll get on that probably at some point this week if I can.
Yeah, sounds good.
So, next question is a YouTube, which is... Oh, no, that was a YouTube, sorry. Next question is a Discord. Typical officer. Question 16. Thoughts on the short-lived F-11 Tiger, F-7U Cutlass, F-4D Skyray, and the F-3H Demon? Why these carrier fighter jets have such a short service life on USN carriers, unlike the Panthers, Phantoms, Crusaders, and Tomcats? Do you think the high degree of accidents and inefficiency in terms of carrier operations prevent them from having a long service life, and also the introduction of Crusader and Phantom? I mean, you've basically answered your own question. They're early jet fighters. They're basically the US going, what do we want out of a jet-powered carrier-based aircraft? And then they find out what they want.
How do we build one?
Yeah.
What does it do?
Yeah, and then they find out what they want, and they build Crusader and Phantom.
I had a conversation similar to this about the current Chinese 5th and 6th gen program, where it's like the 1950s and 1970s aircraft development. Is they build stuff, then they see what works, then they build more of that.
Yeah. And it's also, you've always got to judge it by what works within their paradigm, not what works according to our system, what works according to their metrics. And this is one of the troubles. We judge things by our own standard and go, well, this wouldn't work for us, so it must be a terrible aircraft. But why do they keep having it? Oh, they must be stupid. It works for them. It works for their system and their view of what they want to do. And sometimes that is literally, it can work for them because of the cost point. You know?
The other thing, I hate how much I keep having to hammer this home. The prototype does not have to be good.
No. Enterprise.
That was just terrible. The thing is, the prototype doesn't have to be good, but then don't send the frigating prototype off on a 5-year mission into the unknown.
Well, yeah.
It might be it might be your best asset, but please don't do it because it's a prototype. Send something which is a slightly less capable but more mature fighting design.
Yep.
On the previous, have you seen the latest offerings of the Chinese 6th generation?
Oh, you mean the ones they showed off a couple of weeks ago?
The White Emperor that looks like it's from the movie Stealth.
Yeah. Honestly, you know what? The Chinese are showing off, and I don't think they're at the tech demonstrator phase, and they are doing the Russian, which means they're showing off something that either isn't in service or is in service.
No, they're doing the car company. It's the car company. It's what car companies do all the time. They show us these gorgeous things that they could build, and then they never build them. They're called concept cars. They are purely... The Peugeot are the biggest scam artists of the lot. They produce all these wonderful-looking concept cars, and then they actually produce what they currently call their line of Peugeots.
Yeah.
And don't get me started on Volvo.
Sorry, Volvo, you can't say that about Volvo.
No, they produce sexy-looking concept cars, and then they don't actually build them.
Produce cars.
They
also
produce good
safe
cars, but they don't look like their sexy car or the sexy cars they put in their concept cars.
I'm sorry, have you seen some of the older Volvo estates?
I'm not talking about the older ones, I'm talking about the ones today.
Yeah, they still look really good.
Old Volvos used to look like they made in Blender for in 5 minutes. New Volvos, 10 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But you also, with that look, know that you could drive this car into a concrete pillar and you would not be hurt.
That is why I drive a Volvo. I love Volvos, but I do say this about Subaru. When they produce a concept car, guess what their next generation car tends to look like?
Their last generation Subarus?
Their concept car.
Right.
Not we produced this wonderful concept car. Now look at our next generation of cars. They look nothing alike.
Yep.
Hey, if we talk about that, then shouldn't we throw the rock at Honda of all people?
Yes.
Can we
brilliant hybrid concept cars.
Oh, I'm just gonna leave your fans alone for a minute.
It's just.
Hello, and
it's
you're on
so
Car
annoying.
You're on car
In
talk
the
with car
nicest
talk.
way, since the end of Grand Tour, and let's be honest, the previous program on BBC Two, which wasn't which has gone downhill. There is a need for a new car talk program, so me and Foxo will quite happily supply it. I'm not sure which one of us is Jeremy Clarkson in this new scenario, but we'll work it out. Just as long as neither of us will. Hang on, Foxo. Do you agree that Fleet should be the new Richard Hammond?
No, he's too
Or
tall.
is he going to crash a lot?
Yeah, $60 though is correct though.
I mean, we would have to
You,
chop his legs off at the knee, so he has the right height. But
You're going to own a castle in Herefordshire and have your wife divorce you.
I must say, I still miss being able to tune into Car Talk on NPR every Saturday morning. That was
Right. Knight 6831 asks, at the treaty, how would the RN 37,500 to 43,500 ton Admiral class Eagle style carrier conversion get through, as 3,000 extra tons would not be enough? Did we? I am fairly certain we already answered this one.
We have answered. Basically gone, it's kind of like the Hood scenario, with the Royal Navy going, you want to get rid of what? We think you should. You want to get rid of what? Do you want us in this meeting? Yes. Then you're going to be very quiet about what you were suggesting. And it goes. It ends.
Yeah, and they're basically going to go, you guys can have more carriers. We don't mind. Just don't ask us to get rid of ours.
I think I did talk about. I said, unless I think you would end up with a 10 carrier limit if you're going to go for the same tonnage they historically did.
Yep.
And I think the US would be allowed free conversion, so they'd be allowed to convert free, of the Lexington class battle cruisers, and I think the Japanese would probably also be allowed to convert free. But seeing as they'd have a maximum limit of 6 ships in a tonnage of allowance of 6, where they probably wouldn't want to go for free because that would take up too much of the tonnage.
Yep.
Timo has offered to be Stig, Fox. So do we accept Timo as the Stig? Let's be honest, he's finished, so he can probably drive pretty darn well.
yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, we'll take some
Timo has mistakes.
Okay, so, where are we? Lazy Author asks, it's 1934. Through the magical powers of fairy bullshittery, Bofors and Ehrlichman managed to create a version of their 40mm and 20mm autocannons, respectively, capable of firing rounds at hypersonic speeds. Would that have any significant impact on World War II? I hate to be that guy, but I'm going to be that guy. You are aware of how fast bullets travel, right? We're talking high-end supersonic for most ordnance.
It would, if they're going hypersonic, it's a little bit faster. It would give them probably a little bit more range before they run out of power, so it would increase their range, and that's going to be the big thing more than the speed. It's going to be the range and boost they'll give.
Yeah, it'll be an increase in capability. But the jump between the speeds that the ordnance was already travelling at and the new speed it'll be travelling at are not... It's not
going to startly change the world.
Yeah,
it's not going to be a revolution.
No, it's just... bullets travel slightly further. Whoopee!
How hypersonic are we talking hypersonic? Are we talking about Russia claims hypersonic as in Mark 7, or are we talking about hypersonic as in Mark 10 plus?
Because that would be a massive thing.
Plus.
Okay, that is a bit of an increase.
Well, if we consider the 40mm Bofors,
850 to 880 meters a second.
We're probably looking at the one which enters in 1936. That's 880 meters a second.
Yeah, that's what I just said.
Right. Right. I know, but I'm just checking the maths. So
hypersonic is Mark 5 to Mark 10.
Yeah, so we're basically, if you're going hypersonic,
you're going 3,430 meters per second. So you're going roughly. You're increasing the speed to 4 times it. So you're going from Mach 2.5 to Mach 5, Mach 10.
Yeah.
Which, okay, yes, that is going to increase your range. That is going to make it significantly more kinetic damage the closer you get to it. But again, it's a 40mm. You've got line of sight engagement fired by eye. It's not going to change it that much.
Yeah.
You'd be better off trying to fit a proximity fuse into the shell.
You would be better off, but honestly, yeah.
Honestly, that is a brilliant idea, because at that point you've basically got, like, you can massively, you've got two choices. Like, if they somehow developed a way to make the rounds hypersonic, they can basically just go, well, what if we reduce the kick charge to bring it back to normal rates and increase the bursting charge, or fit a proximity fuse, or, there are options.
What about turn it into an auto gyro?
You can't turn a shell into an auto gyro. Can you?
You do with a bullet.
Oh. Yesn't.
Fleet's not going to invite us back after this, is he? He's just going to cry somewhere, going, "No, they ruined my show. They just ruin my life. They take over these things, and it's just cruelty."
Hey. You're very lucky I like company. And that this has sort of become the Ramblings brand now, so I just have to live with it. Stephen Mayer asks, how devastating would a fuel air explosion...
You make it the Ramblings brand. I keep wondering why you make it the Ramblings brand.
Stephen Mayer asks, because it's fun. Stephen Mayer asks, how devastating would a fuel air explosion going off near to the snorkel of an underway diesel submarine be to the machinery and the crew? Is there any survivors? Well, the water is gonna deafen a lot of the shock, but I'm sorry, that sub is basically going to have to emergency surface.
They said a fuel air explosion with a snorkeling submarine?
Yeah, it's gonna have to surface. It's gonna be damaged.
No, it's a fuel air explosion.
Well, no, it's gonna wreck the snorkel, so it's gonna have to surface to avoid its diesels being flooded. Unless it can deal with the loss of that snorkel.
Well, there are automatic systems with the water starts getting in the snorkel, or the snorkel breaks, that stop it getting to diesel and shut it down and turn it onto batteries.
Oh, fair enough.
That's all automatic.
It depends.
It's probably lost the snorkel, but the thing is also, let's be honest, think about fuel air explosives and what they tend to do. Fuel air explosives tend to be designed to spread the fuel out and set fire to things. Snorkels are lumps of metal.
Fuel air explosions can also just be pure shock and bang. If
thermobaric.
It depends. I mean, you've also got things like the
What it depends on is if there's anything containing it, because so if it's just a fuel air explosion in open air, that's just a fireball. There's gonna be no shockwave there.
But if it's one of the fuel air bombs, which contains that for a little bit, oh boy.
Yeah. Then, well, it depends what it's in, but then you might get some sort of shockwave.
You might, but it's it'll be interesting to see what exactly happens.
Yep. So the whomst pings. Leslie says the FAE would get down in the sub. I have no idea what the FAE is.
Fuel air explosive.
It depends how close it is, Leslie.
And also, the snorkel's designed to deal with all sorts of interesting things happening. I don't think that's going to be necessarily the issue. The reason why snorkels you have to remember, snorkels are designed to take the water of the water of the world trying to get into the sub.
Isn't the issue with fuel air explosives that a good portion of their design is creating an implosion to create a shockwave?
Well, that's the modern thermobaric system, yes.
Which means that if that goes on above a submarine at snorkel depth, that's a shockwave that's going to propagate into water. Which means the crew inside is dead. the submarine.
No, but it's going to. You have to remember, the submarine is probably going to be doubled hulled. It's going to be some insulated. There's going to be lots of
And
rafted
also,
spaces within it.
And also, if submarines below the surface can survive depth, if the crew inside submarines can survive the rattle of depth charges going off nearby that don't actually, pancake the sub's hull, then they can probably survive the effects of an explosion outside the water and the shockwave that'll transmit through the water to the sub. It
just depends on the size of the thermostat. It's a few of the.
Yeah, but
the problem you've got is
also
that it's in the air.
that energy,
They'll
and that energy is going to dissipate across a lot of water.
Yeah, like
A lot of water. There's a lot.
So you've got the fuel air explosion, the explosions in the air. That shockwave now has to pass on to and propagate through the surface of the water. Then it's got to propagate through actual water. Then it's got to propagate through the submarine's hull, and then finally it can propagate onto the crew. The amount of transfers that shockwave has to go through before it reaches the crew is enough that you are unlikely to have any significant physical damage to the crew. They're going to get rattled.
The worst that'll happen.
They're going to get rattled a bit, but...
Well, they're going to get rattled. I think also it might pop several of their eardrums because you might get that pressure wave coming through the snorkel.
It's possible, but I wouldn't bet on it.
Is that snorkelers again? Is it? Yeah.
Because
Well, if the
That's
pressure is
something
trying to get
like a
inside
gun.
the snorkel, it's going to close off the snorkel.
Yeah.
But again, the worst it's going to do is pop some eardrums.
If we consider the possibility that pressure might actually damage the snorkel to the point where it doesn't actually work anymore.
It's possible.
It probably will do. It probably will break the snorkel off, in which case that also, in some ways, helps the submarine. Because the submarine has systems which are designed... One of the things which are designed within the snorkel system is to have systems for if the snorkel gets broken off. Because, believe it or not, they do get damaged, and all sorts of weird things can happen to them.
Mm-hmm.
Mother Nature is not kind.
No.
Okay, so, next question is from Discord, which is, to be officer, thoughts on the early hardcore APS for AFEs like the Droz and the Arena? Do you think the Soviets kickstarted APS technology, and what was the reason they developed APS for the armored fighting vehicle in the first place? Do you think most of the Western APS derived from those two Soviet APSs, and why didn't the British develop their own APS for the AFE instead of using the trophy APS? Well, in regards to the easiest part of that question, which is the why didn't the British develop their own? Because the British are in NATO, and a NATO member has developed a system that works, and it's a very specialised system, and they've worked out the kinks, and we can just buy it and put it on our vehicles. So, yeah, there we go.
Why reinvent the wheel?
Yeah. In regards to the rest of that question, that's a lot more difficult, and honestly, for me personally, I'd want the chieftain here for that one. Because that is...
Just a small thing. Israel's not a member of NATO. They're an ally, but they're not a member of NATO. Trophy was developed by Israel.
Was it? Oh, yeah, I keep forgetting that.
Yes. Just a small thing. Now, the answer to that one, seriously, is because, actually, whilst Rafael Systems did come up with the trophy, there was actually significant involvement, as I understand it, with various British electronic warfare companies which were involved in it. And so it is partially has some British and American technology in it, from what I sort of remember reading somewhere about it, so I could be completely wrong, but I'm just going from memory. And so, to extent because Germany started using it, America starting using it, the Norwegians have chosen it, the British also went, well, we might as well choose it as well, because it seems to be the standard system coming on, and we've already got a stake in it. And we can adapt it. One of the interesting things about Trophy is the Israelis are very happy for you to adapt it to your own national needs. And building something from scratch would take years, maybe decades to field. Adapting something which is an existing system which works, that can be done in years. And there's a big difference in that.
In regards to the other part of that question, that's something that would require a very deep dive into the history of APS as a concept and the various countries that developed it. That's a question I would probably field to the chieftain on one of his Q&As. He will give you a far better answer than we can.
Yes.
96831, question 134. What was the whole 1949 to 1953 cruiser destroyer design studies? I'm handing that one to you, Dr. Clark, because I've never heard of that before in my entire life. But I'm just going to go look.
There are all sorts of studies done in that period because the Royal Navy is always doing studies on in terms of the carrier design, cruiser designs. The major focus of them was to work out the balance between the 8-inch and 6-inch gun and which one was the sensible option for the Royal Navy to pursue. And the Royal Navy ends up deciding the 6-inch gun is the far better option because if you're dealing with, especially pre-radar, when you're dealing with very much visual identification of targets and the likely engagement ranges of cruisers, due to their actual height above water and all sorts of things, then the 6-inch is going to give you more explosive downrange and more shells downrange, which are more chances of hitting. And considering cruisers are all universally quite badly armored at that point, if you can first knock out a cruiser's ability to kill you itself by knocking out its target systems using your 6-inch high explosive, you can then close range and change the 6-inch armor piercing and go crack.
Or alternative, just blanket the thing with high explosive lets a burning wreck.
Yeah, which is basically what a town class methodology is.
Mm-hmm. So that's the same thing. I'm gonna answer Wellesley's question quickly, but I'm also going to do another Discord question after that, because this is very much more of a comedy one. What if the usual panelists perform Hamlet but in Klingon? Hilarity ensues. Next question. So, Brandon Larson, what if... Oh, that's a dragon question, but I'll ask it anyway. Brandon Larson asks, what if Revan, Bastila, Mitra, Surik, and 100 of the most competent commanders from the Mandalorian War are sent through time to just prior to the start of the Clone Wars? How do you see the war going with such competent military officers? The problem is you've taken them to a context they do not understand with... I know warfare doesn't change overly much in the Star Wars universe. Just the weapons with which it's wielded have changed, but the tactics don't really change. Jedi do Jedi things. Troops do troops things. There are walkers and speeders and everything else. I mean... the tacticians on both sides of the Clone Wars are mostly competent officers. We see a lot of the heroes doing hero things during the Clone Wars, but what we don't see are the thousands and thousands of battles where competent CIS commanders and competent Republic commanders just do competent commander things.
It's the classic question. Tagba Tapa.
Hey?
Tagba Tapa.
I don't speak Klingon.
To be or not to be?
Hey. God damn it.
It's the famous quote. Surely you've seen the Klingon Hamlet. It's on YouTube. It's a video.
Really? It's a thing?
It's quite a funny one.
Oh.
Yes.
Yeah.
There
was a group a while back who wanted to do like a whole staged, like on-stage proper production of a Klingon Christmas Carol.
No, they did it. They did it. They published it in a Klingon version of Hamlet in Klingon. Was published in 2000.
Yeah.
I'll have to look that up after Ramblings is done today. Bad fleet noises. So, very quickly, the next question is Timu Locker on YouTube. Should the Swedes have a nuclear SSK? Well, first things first, there's no such thing as a nuclear SSK. That's an SSN. But secondly, no. No, the Swedes have no need for a nuclear-powered attack submarine. Just no. Categorically no. For the operations they do...
say they have no need, but, I don't think the Swedes would ever be disappointed in finding themselves having one.
No.
If you handed over the keys of a brand new Astute class to the Swedish Navy and went, here you go, play with this, they would not be upset with you. They would probably go, we have ideas. And people would get very scared very quickly.
I think you're more likely to find they'll have a SSNC.
Among other reasons, because why the heck is the Royal Navy suddenly confident enough in their submarine program that they're willing to hand over an astute to somebody?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Yeah, basically. Also, Stephen Fry
Good.
on Hamlet. What the heck? I just saw that.
Yeah.
What the heck? Oh, I think I'll have to go watch that after the ramblings is done. Right. So next question is.
I just realized that I need
Typical
to
gunnery
accept
officer.
the invitation.
Give it a go. Asked, what if the IJA started mass production, the Cheeto and the Chi-Ri in the end of 1942 or early 1943? Would the IJA send them to Burma, the Philippines, and later Okinawa? Would the US Sherman tank finally have an on-par opponent in the Pacific? Also, how would these two tanks fare against the Soviets in 1945 in Manchuria? So, the Cheeto is the problem you've got with this question is that the Cheeto and the Chi-Ri are fundamentally vehicles that require the experiences of the Japanese army during the Pacific War to dig into their construction. They also require certain developments in the way in which the Japanese think about tanks and produce their tanks and design their tanks. That's why you don't see them till the end of the war. But all of that aside, the Cheeto is a vehicle that's about a match for a Sherman. It has a slightly better gun than the Sherman does for armor-piercing performance, but they're about on par. You're probably talking about a 50-50 toss-up for which tank wins that fight. The Chi-Ri is a flat overmatch, however. The Chi-Ri has just that bit better armor, where it can resist the Sherman frontally, but the Sherman can't resist the shells coming the other way. In regards to dealing with Russian armor in Manchuria, both these tanks will be fairly effective at knocking out T-34s. They're just going to be laughed. IS-2s are going to laugh hysterically, however, while blowing them apart from range and not being able to be dealt with by those Japanese tanks. The Cheeto and the Chi-Ri are not going to be sent to Burma. They're probably going to be sent to Philippines and Okinawa.
Are you suggesting something called Joseph Stalin? Joseph Stalin is going to be laughing at any point.
Yes.
While doing their serious work of annihilating the enemies of Mother Russia.
Yes, that is exactly what I'm
the
suggesting.
homeland.
Yes. It's Stalin. It's Stalin. The man has a warped sense of humor. And he does actually have a sense of humor. Yes, Romanar. Yes, what?
How are those tanks going to stand up against what is it, 75 or 76 HVAP?
Cheeto is going to be utterly bought. Cheeto is just with Cheeto you don't even need HVAP. That's going to be able to be dealt with by 75mm AP pretty much. I'm fairly certain. Chi-Ri is just not going to be resistant to HVAP at all. But that
also requires the US Army to actually give HVAP to its tankers
in the Pacific, which they're not going to do.
Wasn't part of the HVAP issue a one part tungsten, one part we don't need it?
Yeah, basically, and also in the Pacific, they're just not going to have it. Pretty much all of
It was also a case of the round also had a habit of blowing up in the gun in when it was wet.
Yeah, this is the thing. Like the Cheeto, you don't really need. But to be blunt, it's a moot point anyway, given the fact that if these Japanese tanks make themselves known and they even become remotely an issue, you're fighting on small islands for the most part, and even during the cases when you're not, the United States Navy air power is everywhere. Just summon a pair of Corsairs and send that tank back to the Emperor with a bunch of bombs and rockets.
To be fair, usually actually destroyer crews prefer you to summon them because destroyer guns versus tank guns is something that Royal Navy and the US Navy destroyer crews consider to be a perfectly acceptable match.
Yeah. Either way, summon something that isn't the tank that you can't deal with the enemy tank with and blow up said enemy tank.
Yes.
Next question is from YouTube.
Where are they going to get the resources to build them all from, though?
The problem the Japanese had wasn't actually building the tanks. The Japanese were building a reasonable number of tanks. There's no reason why they couldn't have built Cheetos or Chi-Ris. The problem was Japanese doctrine and army requirements catching up with what the army actually needed. That was a thing.
There's also the small matter of getting them out of Japan. What the heck was that?
I have no idea.
Sorry, I went over the roughest strip.
Oh, okay, that would do it. There's also the small matter of getting them off of the home islands and out to the ever closer front lines.
It's not beyond the realms of possibility since we know they did it with their more modern anti-tank. We know that things were actually able to get out of Japan to the islands under siege, or that were about to be under siege. So we know it's something they did. Especially with things like the more modern anti-tank guns, the more modern anti-aircraft guns, and even some of the more modern tanks. Like, yes, things like the Chi-Ri and the Chi-To and the Chi-Nu didn't leave Japan, but that wasn't because they couldn't. It was because they were being held back for the invasion of the home islands.
Weird random question, which probably somebody in the panel knows. When did arc induction furnace become the primary way of steelmaking?
Arc induction, that's post-war.
Okay.
Like, it's around. It's around in the interwar period, and it's around during the war, but it doesn't become the primary method of steelmaking until post-war.
I would like to know that I'm currently being overtaken by a double-headed CSX hopper car train.
Ugh. How boring.
The interesting thing is that
identical locomotives.
It's when you realise that electric arc induction has been used to melt metal, especially iron, since about 1810.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's been around for a long, long time.
Oh, it has been, but it was more in reference to Ronon's specific question.
Yeah, they don't actually. It's one of the things that's been around for a long time, but it's one of those things. Again, it's technology which has been around. We have an idea of how to do it. We can't actually do it for a long time.
Yep.
Yeah.
Hello again, hydrolysis. How are you today?
So the next question is from 1971. What was the 1940 Endrak class that the Dutch were looking at? Basically, that was the Dutch going, okay, let's get actually serious about building cruisers now. What do we actually need? And they basically come up with a design that is, they take De Ruyter as a concept, they stretch it, they grow it, basically. They go from 3 twins and a single to 2 twins and 2 triples for 10 guns. Armor belt, I think, stays roughly similar as designed. And the plan
Armor increased.
Oh, did it?
I recall they wanted a 4-inch belt.
They're basically looking at something that goes against Washington Treaty light cruisers and goes, I'm probably going to win this fight if you fight me. Basically. Because I have slightly more armor than you do.
Unless I'm fighting a tank
hard.
or something big big and nasty.
Yeah, it's. I mean, honestly, the Endraks are basically of that similar vein to the towns. They're basically, if you are not a post-treaty cruiser, I'm probably going to win the fight.
Yes.
Dr. Clark, are you insinuating that the town class cruisers were designed to take on far more armor than they were initially fitted with?
No, he's talking about
the town. The town class do certainly have capabilities to be county-ish. In fact, I don't think there's a single batch of British cruisers built in the 1920s and 30s which does not have the option of, we found some more armor plate magically. We can bolt this on the outside.
Oh no! Anyway.
The Royal Navy's been practicing fitted for, not with, for a long time.
And they still do to this day.
The trouble is, it's changed. It used to be fitted for, not with. We're going to fit it sitting in a warehouse. To fitted for, not with. We can order it, and maybe we'll get it in about 20 years' time.
Yeah. So very quickly, I want to answer typically an officer's question. The G5N isn't really a realistic what if because the aircraft had so many flaws and just came out as a fundamentally underpowered aircraft. And by the time the Japanese look at long-range bombers again, you get the G8N. There was never really a universe where the G5N enters service as a bomber. Because by the time they're looking at building something to do its job, they're looking at the G8N. Just a more well-rounded, capable airframe. That's just basically better in every way. Moving swiftly on to the next Discord question. Where are we? Wormst.
Lee, are you going to force me to develop Powder Monkey to scan Discord chats as well?
Yeah, honestly,
Yeah.
you may as well at this point.
It would make life a lot easier.
But we'll have to wait until that's, in my own server, because this is Drax server, and I don't want to give Powder Monkey access to Drax server.
It will just mine his server. Or mine it.
Lazy Author asks, had Frederick III lived longer, say around 30 years or more, what would change in Germany and its diplomacy? Fundamentally unknowable. We have some inkling of what Emperor Frederick III might have done, but without knowing how successful he would have been in his reforms, what pushback there would have been from the German nobility and the army, without knowing how the reforms would have gone, how successful he would have been, what his relationship with Bismarck would have been.
He would probably have got rid of Bismarck to an extent because he'd oppose it, but he was actually quite confident with the army. He wouldn't have favoured the navy as much because, frankly, he thought Tirpitz and quite a lot of the navy were a bit of it. It was some to the extent some sort of quit. He quite liked his. He didn't. He was. His wife was, of course, Princess Victoria, and he quite liked her.
Yes.
So it would have been interesting. The interesting thing is how would it affect the longer he lives? Does he eventually let Wilhelm succeed? If he lives 30 years, that takes him up to 1918. Now that could change a lot of the world. It's a very long thing. You can't really go for that long because things are going to compound and believe them. I can tell you that.
How does he deal with crises like Morocco? How does he deal with the strengthening of Russia? Yeah, this is the thing. Like if you want to ask him what he would do in 5 and 10 years, yeah, we could probably have a crack at that. But 30 years is just
The thing is, I just doubt there's a naval law passed in 1898. And if it is, it won't be like the historic one was.
It'll basically be okay. It'll basically be okay. France and Russia exist. Let's build a fleet that can match up against one of them at a time.
Yeah.
Yeah, or it'll be more of a qualitative race versus a quantitative race.
Honestly, it'll just be Germany joining the European naval powers as a power roughly equivalent to probably a little bit stronger than Russia and France. So not Russia and France put together, but it'll become the rank 2 naval power, but not in a way that makes Britain go, "Oh, good lord, Germany."
Yes, and they'll probably do that as a qualitative race.
Yeah, they'll probably join the qualitative dreadnought race, the qualitative battleship race, which would be interesting because if you've got
I reckon
everyone putting that all into their qualitative race, that could actually really push battleships quite dramatically.
Dr. Clark, I do think there will be a surge at first. So, there will be I think the pre-dreadnought period will go mostly similar. But then I think basically just to surge the German fleet to a point where it has that advantage over Russia and France. But then they're going to come off the, they're going to, once they've got the battle fleet in place, they're going to come off the gas pedal, start building cruisers,
I think
destroyers.
It'll be post the Russo-Japanese War. I think if the Russian fleet's knocked down, then they're going to think, well, now's our chance.
Yeah. We can get ahead of the French. But basically, they're going to go, we can actually build now to equivalence with France and Russia without scaring the British.
Yeah.
So next question is on YouTube, and it's a fairly good one because it's actually a fairly short answer. Bone Meal Boy asks, if oil was found in British-owned Alaska in 1900, how does this affect British intervention in Iran? We answered this last week, but basically, the problem you've got is that the British are probably still going to buy the shares in Persia anyway, because A, the British see Persia as their sphere of influence regardless of whether there's oil there or not, and, to be blunt, they don't want anyone else getting their hands on it.
And they probably buy their shares in Canada Oil as well.
Yeah.
You probably end up with the world having three great big... By the post-World War II scenario, you end up with the world having three great big British-owned, heavily owned and influenced oil companies, Shell, BP, and Canada Oil.
Yeah.
And yeah, if for no other reason for Persia, then Persia can directly threaten Mediterranean to India trade lanes.
And it can also sustain and supply them. You have to remember, one of the reasons why Britain was keen on having these multiple sources of oil was sustaining the empire around the world, naval operations around the world.
Yeah, it's easier to get oil from Persia to Singapore than it is to get oil from Canada to Singapore.
Yeah. Canada can supply UK, the home nations. You want to get that the oil you've got in coming in from the Gulf, from the Middle East. You're looking to supply the Mediterranean fleet. You're looking to supply the Far Eastern forces.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the thing.
I was supposed to get a package today. I did not see a package.
Okay, so
Also, I would like to disclose that my work site is made out of soup.
Soup.
Always fun to have.
Yeah.
Honestly, I am going to leave this one to the panel for a second because Le Dog is being funny again, so I need to go see what that's all about. But it's a good one for the panel to talk about while I'm away because, well, it's, I don't want to deal with this. Your typical gunnery officer asks, how would the impact of a yearly 8% reduction of the US military budget do for the US and the Allies for the next several years in terms of deterrence and weapons development? Would the US finally leave NATO for good if this happens? Have fun with that one!
When? Also, an 8% reduction is essentially catastrophic, I think is a good word. Yeah, this is just bad. It's just like 8% year over year. Where's the text on this question? Did my connection die?
No.
Okay. Does somebody have the text on this question? Because essentially the answer is nothing good.
Right, gents, I need to run off. Have a good evening. Take care all.
Thank you, gunnery officer. It would cripple. It would cripple the U.S. military. That's horrendous. Yeah, because the problem is, does that also include the intelligence budget? Because if that includes the intelligence budget, then you're going to have a lot less information flowing into the European intelligence community as well. And yes, I know that the U.S. does receive a decent amount of intelligence, if not a tremendous amount of intelligence from Europe as it sits. Yeah, that's no bueno. That's bad. Essentially, you're going to start cutting programs. You're going to start cutting hull numbers. You're going to start cutting air fleet numbers. You'll probably see F-35 get a hell of a lot more expensive. Parts for export fighter and aircraft are going to get more expensive because the U.S. military will be buying less of them. essentially, it's just going to make everything more expensive for everybody. Would the U.S. finally leave NATO? A lot of that's going to depend upon why you're seeing an 8% annually cut, an annual 8% cut to the DoD's budget. I have a gut feeling that the U.S. would leave NATO before they started doing that, and then this would be the drawdown as the U.S. retreats to a regional power. Yeah, pretty much. Force reduction, early decommissioning of ships, less personnel on ships and armed forces overall. Yep. Yeah, the current SecDef wants to do a lot of things. Some of them might actually wind up being good, maybe, if we're lucky. 8%. 8% is a big number when you're talking about something as big as the DoD and how expensive a lot of those programs are. I thought we were trying to build a 600 or whatever ship fleet, so I don't know why we're going for 800 year or 8% year reduction. That seems to be counterproductive. But yeah, what do I know?
So, I assume that question's been hammered into the dirt, has it? Good, moving on.
Not really. I'm the only one that answered it.
I think Runon was just about to get onto the fact that part of the problem is going to see how that money's invested, whether it's... there's discussions as whether or not that's going to be 8% reduction in existing programs for efficiencies and the money's going to be kept within defense, being invested in more programs, or whether it's going to be cut from defense. And if it's cut from the fence, then that's gonna go in the face of the expansion and the strengthening of the forces that they're claiming they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if it's refocused into other programs, it's going to depend on which programs and how they refocus it. One of the interesting things you've got is that you've got some people who honestly don't seem to get the idea that it takes a long time. Not because you want it to take a long time, but just because getting these things to work together, because war is quite a complicated scenario, to integrate often new technologies in a practicable manner. Not a practical, a practicable manner. So it's actually a viable option for a utility. And one of the things I think you're seeing is we're seeing what drones have done in a permissive environment. We've seen what drones have done in a semi-permissive environment, and I would say there are certainly areas where you can classify it as being semi-permissive, rather than necessarily not permissive or permissive. In Ukraine, etc. It's going to be interesting to see because the testing that's coming out is interesting of the scenarios of what happens if they're in an environment which is a non-permissive environment, especially one which is heavily conquered by electronic warfare assets. And that can have a serious degradation on current drone generation.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Realistically, any money recovered from an 8% cut to the DoD budget is going to go to fund tax cuts.
Or into someone's pocket.
Yes, that's what a tax cut is. It goes into. Yeah, it's going to go into Wall Street's pocket essentially. Any budget reduction of that nature is unlikely to be reinvested into the general budget, and is far more likely to be used as a methodology to fund tax cuts.
Yep. So, the next question is from Knight6831. Dr. Clark, please explain how the Victorious was in such a bad state when she was in the best material state to be rebuilt.
No, she wasn't in the best material state to be built. She was judged to be a viable candidate to be rebuilt of the older ship's options to test out the ideas that they wanted to test out on her, because it was considered better to test out on a ship which is pretty much already broken than to test out on the Implacables, because if you mucked her up, then it didn't matter as much as if you mucked up the Implacables. The trouble is, someone then got it on their idea in their head that it was actually essential that you rebuilt Victorious, and you had to succeed, and you couldn't admit that you couldn't do it, so they sunk all the budget into her and never used the money to instead rebuild the Implacables. When actually what they should have done is, once they'd done the deep survey, gone, oh frigate, this is never going to work, cut that, kick her out, Implacables in.
Yep. That's about
And
the
then
long
you
and
could
short
have
of it.
possibly had about four, you could have, in nicest way, Eagle, Ark Royal, and Implacables would probably have been far more of a viable four for quite a long time.
It would have bought you
And it might have kept...
It would have bought you enough
It would have-
breathing room to get through to a Catabar replacement. And I don't mean CVA-01. I mean some form of Catabar replacement instead of the Invincibles.
Yeah. Because it would have given you that sort of level of capability.
And basically, the replacement would have been... You would still have got the Invincibles, but the Falklands War would have made it abundantly clear why they are not going to be the absolute capital assets of the RN. Because those Catabar carriers that remain would have been proven during the Falklands.
Yeah, because it's gonna sound strange. If you have 4 carriers to spread the load out, especially 4 decent carriers to spread the load out, then Ark Royal and Eagle don't get server used, which means they're not so worn, which means they probably last longer in service, and you might well have one of those still around in the Falklands War, and then it's going to be a case of, oh, frigate. Yeah, Invincible's really not a good idea.
Well, it's not that the Invincibles aren't a good idea. They are a good idea for what they were designed to do. They're just not replacements for proper Catabar carriers.
Yeah, what they're designed to do is a very limited circumstance.
Okay, so
very limited circumstance.
Next question is... Oh, come on, Discord, play nice with me, please.
Why does Discord have to play nice with you?
Because I need it to actually work so I can answer people's questions.
Yeah, but stop presuming that you to tell Discord what it has to do. Discord is Discord. It's allowed to be free.
Essentially, what I'm hearing is that I need to find a way to get Meeseeks or Carlbach or similar to repost questions from Discord into YouTube or Twitch chat so that Powder Monkey can grab it if I can't get one of those services to handshake with StreamerBot.
Sounds good.
Fleet, why? Why, Fleet? Why?
Brackman asks, what's your favourite sea myth or legend, or do you think there's any truth behind it? My favourite sea myth is actually, I know this is going to sound a bit cliche, but I am really fond of the whole Kraken bit. Like, I know there are, like, giant squids and stuff behind it and everything, but the idea of there being just a massive cephalopod under the ocean that can sink ships just is amusing to me, because I am really fond of large things under the ocean. And I would really love for there to actually be a large cephalopod under the ocean. I know that giant and colossal squid are about as big as they can realistically go before they start encountering problems with their own biology. But still, large cephalopod.
What's your opinion on the Quacken?
The Quacken is eh. It's an eh. That's an eh moment. I'm just going to say that. It's an eh moment.
Okay.
It makes you quack in fear.
I won't be cruel and say that, because that'd be just cruel of me to say that. It would just be cruel. It'd be cruel. I won't say that. That'd be me torturing Fleet for no reason. It's just cruelty.
Hey.
It could be fun, but I won't do that, because that'd be cruel. That would be cruel.
Dr. Clark, has cruelty ever stopped you from needling Fleet before?
Stop it.
I'm trying to be... it's just the fact that he seems to be so obsessed with large tentacles under things.
Stop it.
You know.
Look, I like marine biology. I like octopuses and squid. I think they're fascinating creatures.
Fleet. Quit while you're ahead. Quit while you're ahead. Move along swiftly. Quit while you're ahead. There is nothing you can say from this point out that is going to make this less laughable. Please, quit while you're ahead.
I know.
Well, you say
That
you
was
know,
very
you're
nice.
not doing it.
I let you. I let it go. I was being nice. I'd heard it and gone, really? Okay. But I was being nice.
All right. Okay, so the next question is Timu Locker. Why did the RN continue with the tradition of having aviation support ships after World War II? I think they did for a good chunk of the period, didn't they?
They did. In fact, HMS Unicorn herself survived for quite a while after World War II, doing that sort of role. And then there was some light fleet carriers which also continued in the role. Basically, it's quite a fun role. It's quite a useful unit to have. As long as you have a large empire and you have to patrol it, and you need to make a case for the infrastructure. Once you've built the permanent infrastructure up, and once the aircraft have evolved and numbers of aircraft have got down, and all these things, you stop necessarily needing the dedicated vessels. But Unicorn does a sterling job resupplying and doing interesting operations during the Korean War, including shore bombardment, because, they decide to fire at her, and she decides, I might be a forward aviation support ship, but I ain't gonna take that from you.
Yeah.
Would it be fair to say that there isn't a shore target that the Royal Navy warship doesn't want to bombard?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, and the nicest way, aircraft carriers in the Royal Navy believe they're both part of the battle line and the shore bombardment line. And
That's because you kept converting them out of battleships and battle cruisers. What did you expect?
The thing is, the carriers which do that most often are the ones which weren't conversions.
And you contaminated the thought pool.
That's not too wrong. I can't really disagree with that. That's the point.
I don't think aircraft carriers' machine spirits work like the Borg hive mind.
You want to bet? They're the Royal Navy
you
ones.
met HMS Warspite?
So
actually, no, you probably haven't, because if you did, you would be dead.
Yeah. So,
next question.
Yes. So I'm gonna very quickly answer this one because it's a very quick question and a good one to end off of. Utility Gunnery Officer asks, do you think this proposed Centaur is going to be better than the refit Essex and possibly Midway? No. No, 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 no. I don't care how much work you do to a Centaur. There is no way that a rebuilt Centaur is going to be a better carrier than a rebuilt Essex or a rebuilt Midway. Size works against it.
Yeah.
It's not a possibility.
What if we do an Italian rebuild?
I no. You just can't. You can't make up the size difference. And if you try to, the costs involved are going to be just build a full-on super carrier.
Yeah. Okay.
Build a new carrier. Just do that.
It's
I
cheaper
spent too much time on the internet.
It's cheaper and far easier for your soul to do that. So,
I will very quickly just answer Timu's question to finish off on, and it'll be a good segue into a end of ramblings announcement. Timu Locker asks, has the Red Fleet timeline counted all the nasty tricks that the Finns and the Swedes had in store for invasions from any direction? No, because Finland and Sweden don't really feature, because they don't really change.
So it's kind of like Australia. You forgot about them.
I've not forgotten about them because unlike Australia,
despite your having Finnish family, you forgot about them.
No, there's no real.
You don't care about your Finnish heritage. You don't care about your Finnish family. You forgot about them.
There's no real reason
it always
to add.
got me about the Red Fleet timeline. The fact that in this world, wouldn't the Finns want to finish their nuclear weapons project?
Probably. Let's be honest, if I've got that much firepower looking at me, I'd want nukes.
Not really.
Yeah.
Most of that firepower isn't in the Baltic. And even what is it, the old dregs of the Russian fleet. The only real extra assets in the Baltic are Sovietsky Soyuz when she's taken off the Northern and Pacific fleets, and then Graf Zeppelinsky also ends up in the Baltic, but then both of them are in reserve post 1960. And even then, the answer to that threat is more conventional forces like coastal anti-ship missiles. Because...
Yeah, but put a nuclear warhead on them and you wipe out the entire task group.
I mean, it's not...
Well, let's be honest, we are talking about a nation which, during the 1920s, was honestly considering the idea of putting mines entirely across, stretching from Helsinki to Tallinn.
And again, this is all very good, but again, they don't really get involved in any conflicts that take place during the timeline. When in reality, there's only one real different conflict from historical.
Well, it's not the getting involved in conflicts which has the impact on them. It's going to be not getting involved in conflicts which is going to have the impact.
There's no reason to fundamentally
I don't want to get involved in conflicts.
There's no reason to fundamentally change the procurement of Sweden or Finland.
Yeah, there is.
The Soviets Soviets and the Allies are both procuring massively larger forces than they did historically. Yeah.
No.
And remember, the Soviets spent the entire time making lovey-dovey eyes at the island of Gotland.
Yes, but you haven't changed the fundamental...
But are you telling me that a much stronger Red Fleet ain't gonna
You
go...
haven't changed the fundamental forces in the Baltic, because that much stronger Red Fleet is where it should be, in the Northern Fleet and the Pacific. The Baltic and the Black Sea are very much unchanged.
Wait, my buddy, my pal, my friend. If the Soviets and NATO have far more assets available as a general rule, then that means those assets can be moved to a position which could threaten the Nords.
Yes, they can, but again, I would point out the fact that the Swedes and the Finns are in a position where, while this is something that could occur, you've also got the fact that the majority of, historically, the majority of NATO and Pact assets are being pointed at each other. The Russians...
Yeah?
The Russians
but
have
that's
known...
not what the fleet... That's not what the Swedes planned for, though. The Swedes planned for the Soviets chucking everything out of the kitchen sink at them.
Well, in that case, then, the solution...
Hence total defense mobilization.
Yes.
Hence them pushing for nuclear weapons.
Swedish CVA 1.
No.
Don't you agree, Foxo?
No, that's aggressively silly.
But that's silly. But I was more thinking of, what if we take a Draken and put, instead of a cruise missile under it, we put a nuclear tipped cruise missile?
This is the sort of minutia. This is the sort of minutia we've been trying to avoid because it's unneeded. And if we tried to do it,
but one of the most important nations of the Cold War.
Not in relation to the timeline we're discussing.
Bone meal boy.
Always.
Does the UN still exist?
Yes.
Oh.
So therefore Sweden is still one of the most important part of the Cold War.
It's just...
Because Swedish arms neutrality was a large part of the method in which, especially in the early Cold War, the Warsaw Pact and NATO communicated and sent signals to each other through Sweden.
Yes, but that doesn't... I am not going to... There is no reason to fundamentally change Swedish defence procurement.
There is.
No, there is not.
Expand it, certainly, and minimum. Expand it.
Well, yes, but I'll just say Swedish defence procurement is expanded, and then I can leave it there.
Well, the thing is, though, once you expand it, you then also add in, you're not just going to buy more of what you're already getting. You're going to get some other capabilities as well. There's going to be capabilities you're going to want.
Not really.
Here's what I remember.
If you've got a much more militant Red Fleet,
it's not a more militant
threat that can be transferred to the Baltic, because there isn't a convention on the Danish Straits.
Here's what I prefer. Here's what I put to the panel, because we could be here for another 4 hours on this topic.
We should be, I think, realistically.
Realistically, yes. But why don't we see if
Because I
Fleet
don't
can-
think Fleet has put enough time into it. I think honestly,
why
he can
don't we?
more.
Wait, hang on. Sorry, Dr. Clark, but I'm going to stamp down. Why don't we see if Fleet can find it in the budget to set aside a ramblings in the next 3 to 6 weeks to go over the Nords in Red Fleet timeline?
Honestly, we can do that. Like, we can. Honestly, there could be a rambling set aside to discuss the things that aren't discussed on Monday. There's nothing wrong with that as a concept.
I think. Well, the trouble is, you keep saying Monday's going to be the definitive, which means it's going to be the final one, and this is why
Would
this
you
is bringing up all these
just
problems.
drop it, please? Otherwise, I'll not do it at all.
Nuclear weapons. All I'm asking is for Swedish nuclear weapons.
Foxo, please stop.
Dr. Clark, I think you're getting Fleet to the point where he's going to ask for life uninstallation by Poodle at this point.
Anyway, so to very quickly
I'm
come
going to
back
poodle his streets.
to
I'm
very
fine.
to very quickly come back to the finale. Thank you everyone for watching. As I've said, tune in on Monday for the Red Fleet timeline. And that's what I'm just calling it. Tune in for the Red Fleet timeline. That'll be the major events of the timeline.
Which is going to have added Australia.
Not really. It'll be a single cliff note saying they got some stuff, and that'll be that.
They get a CVO one.
No, they don't.
They do.
No,
they
they
get a
don't.
CVO one.
No, they don't.
They do.
No, they don't.
They get a CVO
This is
one.
my timeline.
They
I
do.
say what goes here.
They get a CVO one.
No, they don't.
Honestly, they get a CVO
No,
one.
they don't.
They
Moving
do.
on.
They get a CVO one.
Obviously, they
By
get
the way,
too.
Fleet, I've been meaning to tell you, by this time next week, I will be in the UK.
Well, have fun. Good stuff.
Also,
I will
Terry,
be
did
going
you
to York.
take that?
I will be within
Did you
strike
take that
range.
game workshop thing?
What?
Because you mentioned on my server a while back that you offered a sponsorship by Games Workshop of all companies.
Not
That's the Warhammer
sponsorship, a
stuff.
retailer.
Yeah.
I would be one of their retailers. I'm leaning towards it.
Yeah, take it. It's good money.
Yeah.
Can you give me a deal on
I
plastic
probably
bag?
Anyway, so
Yes.
so tune in on Monday for the Red Fleet timeline. The version that is 3 years in the making, basically, and has been worked on by people such as Dr. Clark, myself, Drac, Rex's Hanger, certain other people you
I
might
think an
know.
Australian CVO one. What would it be called? Possibly Albatross.
But
or Pegasus.
Nah.
Can
HMAS
I
Emu.
No.
Well, you see, the carriers were Sydney, Melbourne, and Vengeance. So,
Vengeance for the Emu Wars.
Vengeance is a good name. Let's be honest, for an aircraft carrier, that is a cool one. It is a cool one. It's worthwhile thinking because honestly, the Australians would take it quite seriously because it would be their flagship. Sydney and Melbourne, and if we consider the Canberra class are the current LHDs, and they're their current sort of flagship, so it might be Canberra.
Hey, so
in which case would come, of course, the ultimate discussion of could you take a Canberra off from Canberra? But we'll leave that
can
to
I
one
please finish?
No.
side.
Thank you everyone for watching. Tune in on Monday. We're gonna have a really good panel. It's gonna be a good time. Like it's been multiple years in the making. I've been teasing it for ages. It's gonna be fantastic. Take care, everyone, and I'll catch you on